Okay, welcome everyone to episode 8 of the Dimensional Cascade podcast, coming at you from the Shoreline, Washington. This is Aiden here in the dungeon. I've got with me
Ricky,
Tom,
and I'm back. I'm Taylor. Hi.
Yeah, Taylor back in the house.
Boo.
Well,
well,
yay.
I kind of live here.
That's true, but you never really leave. But you're actually, you know.
It's true. I'm like a bad rash.
On that shiny, happy note. So tonight's podcast, we're going to be talking a little bit about some of the new releases that have come out from Games Workshop.
What else?
Yeah. Yes, maybe a little bit about the Wood Elves. Not very much. We're going to keep that for after I've, smacked everybody around a little bit, and we can do a proper book review. But we'll definitely talk about that a little. We've got some tournament news to talk about. But the Art of War tonight will be a discussion about fast cavalry. Yeah, so that's partially because the Wood Elves have come out, partially because Taylor has now switched to using Dark Elves.
I was getting real talk about the Dark Elves fast cav.
Yeah. Partially because Tom always uses fast cav.
do I? Well, a little tiny bit.
No, a little bit.
Little tiny bit,
Well, only Chaos Dwarfs he does.
Just the tip.
He does.
Just
All right.
the tip.
And
Just because there's something that is becoming more and more prevalent throughout the game, it seems.
Yeah,
especially
for sure.
with Dark Elves and Wood Elves who can field armies of almost entirely fast cav.
Yep.
Definitely worth devoting a bit of time to them.
Yeah, so we'll be talking a bit about how to play with them and how to play against them, and then our hobby horse. I'm glad to get back to having our hobby section in the podcast. With the last 2 episodes, it's been all war and no hobby.
Wasn't it just 2 weeks of talking about how awesome dwarfs were?
It was 2 weeks of dwarves, but that technically came under the Art of War. So we've got a fairly meaty hobby horse section this week around. Oh my God!
Mr. Hands
Horse
horse.
IQ level in this room is about. Anyway,
I bring it down a whole octave in a good way.
Hung like a hobby horse.
Meanwhile, back in reality land, and we've lost Ricky. So the hobby horse section this week is going to be about green stuff and using green stuff for conversions. We will probably talk for as long as we can about it without going into like full on how do you sculpt from scratch.
Yeah.
But we're mostly talking about
making nice modifications to miniatures rather than kind of redesigning them entirely.
Yes.
Which maybe we'll get to in
a later podcast, but this time around it's mostly about simple conversions leading to slightly more complex ones.
Yeah.
Okay, so that is the outline for today's show, and we are, of course, going to start with the pit. The pit. The pit. The pit. Sigvald was once the son of a powerful warlord king whose dark desires led him to carnal and unnatural acts. When a child was born from the union of the warlord and his own sister, the bastard infant was handsome indeed. Yes, it was true. His hair, and by that I mean my hair, was spun like gold, and his skin was unblemished, save for a tiny horned birthmark on the back of his neck. Yeah, it's because I'm so horny. At first, Sigvald's every wish was made manifest. However, the prince's excesses eventually grew too obscene even for his father, and when his fondness for human flesh was discovered, Sigvald was banished. The boy prince feigned dismay, but when his father retired for bed, Sigvald slew him with his own blade. Oh my God, I hate this guy.
Yeah. I want him to die.
I will be actually sad when he leaves because we'll never do the voice again.
Shadowblade is still relatively young, having known less than 2 years of Malekith's rule. His reputation, however, is legendary, and his arrogance is as bottomless as the sea. Fables of his grisly adventures are already used as stories to scare Dark Elf children. A litany of murder and terror that grows longer and bloodier with each passing day. Shadowblade's most famous exploit was the slaughter of the entire crew of a High Elf Hawk ship, one by one, over a period of several days. Only the horribly mutilated captain was left alive, so that he could tell of the mounting horror on the ship as the crew desperately attempted to corner Shadowblade, to no avail.
Cool. That's way cooler than Sigvald.
I'm scared.
Oh yeah, it's great. Oh,
I'm going to get a spanking. Yeah.
oh, boat party.
All right. So in the pit, for those of you who are joining us for the first time, we've got Sigvald and Shadowblade. They are 24 inches apart. We're playing this out like a regular game of Warhammer. So we've covered Sigvald's rules in a previous episode, but let's go over the rules for Shadowblade there.
All right, you want me to just list numbers and then go down the list?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah, all right. So movements, Shadowblade, movement 6, weapon skill 10, ballistic skill 10, strength 4, tough 3, 2 wounds, initiative 10, 3 attacks, and leadership 9.
Does he have anything to throw?
He has nothing to throw.
Oh,
Yeah, he's got nothing.
He should have a little
Well, it's just like the Bloodthirster.
Yeah.
I mean, it's ballistic
it might be
skill
like a
10.
40K thing or something.
Can't
I don't
do
know. I
anything.
haven't looked into
A
it.
40k
but
Dark Elf?
it- I don't know. It's
Yeah.
something.
It's just to look impressive. It's
I
like,
think,
oh, check out the
don't-
size of my
well,
ballistic
don't-
skill.
Yeah, but don't other assassins in the book have that same?
They
I'm not
have
sure.
throwing weapons, I think.
So I think it's just like
Yeah, that's probably all it is.
I don't know.
Okay, let's
anyways,
read a special
Okay, so
rules.
special rules is a killer, not a leader, which makes it so that a unit that he is in cannot use his leadership.
Not relevant for the pit.
Nope.
No.
ASF, so he's got rerolls.
Standard elf.
Hatred High Elves, which is not Sigvald. He's hidden, so he's hidden in a unit, but Shadowblade's so awesome that he can actually, at the beginning of each turn's movement phase, switch between units. And it's not because he's just super fast or anything. It's just because his disguise was so good that he's not actually where everyone else thought that they thought that he was.
yeah, it's pretty
Yeah.
awesome.
I like
So
that.
you just got to
Yeah.
make a note.
So one
somewhere.
unit of Dark Elves runs into combat thinking that Shadowblade's there to look after them. They're like, crap,
They're
he's
like,
not
they're
here.
like, we got this.
He's disguised as a horse. Okay, what else have you got?
He's immune to psychology. He's got murderous prowess, so he's re-rolling wounds on 1.
Okay,
And he's got poison attacks.
Okay.
That's just all naturally.
so his equipment now.
Yep. So he has Dance of Doom, which is a 5 board. Hidden special rule, blah, blah, blah. Anyways, Forbidden Poisons, he's got all 3 of them. The Black Lotus is whenever he wounds a character, they get -1 leadership for the rest of the game. The Dark Venom, I believe, is Killing Blow. Let me just make sure. Dark Venom's Killing Blow, and Manbane is +1 to wound.
Interesting.
Oh, that's solid.
And does he choose which one he's going to use at the start of combat?
No, he gets them all.
He has all 3
Oh.
all
Yeah,
the
he-
time.
So it's
inherently
+1
has
to
all
wound
3.
Just
and
coated
killing
in all
blow.
those.
Yeah, he's got all of them. He's
And
dangerous.
What was the third one?
-1 leadership if he doesn't.
Oh,
The first
interesting.
one was Black Lotus, which is -1 leadership whenever he wins a character.
For each wound or one or more wounds?
Each wound.
Interesting.
So he has some magic items. He has the Heart of Woe, which is an enchanted item, and if he's ever slain, you place a small round template above him, and then everything underneath that template gets a Strength 3 hit. And then he's removed as a casualty after that Strength 3 hit is resolved. And he also comes with a free Potion of Diabolical Strength.
What does that do?
Oh, yeah. It's +4 strength.
Nice.
For a turn of combat.
Yeah, so he
Solid.
becomes strength 8 with +1 to wound.
All right.
And he's re-rolling ones, so he's pretty much always.
Well, I better hope it works because at only 2 wounds he's going to get.
Yeah, so
nailed.
so
Yeah.
this could be a simultaneous death here. So let's see what happens.
Hopefully he killing blows Sigvald.
Okay, so we have who's rolling for Sigvald? Whose turn is it?
Well, Ricky's normally rolls for
No.
Sigvald, but he wants nothing to do with Sigvald
not
anymore,
touching
so
him
I guess
anymore.
I'm doing
All right,
it.
it's all you,
All right,
Tom.
Tom for Sigvald.
Could I get the rules for
We'll roll to
Sigvald
see those
over
first.
here?
Yeah.
Yep, and we've got Taylor rolling for Shadowblade. Okay, so let's roll off the first turn.
First turn.
Oh, 6 for Sigvald
Sigvald's
and
up.
3.
All right,
Okay,
24.
so the first thing you got to do is roll your stupidity check there. Oh, am I too pretty to move? No, I'm
No,
not.
I'm
Okay.
No,
Not
he's
too
really
pretty.
okay.
Okay, so he rolls a 3
He's
for
too
stupidity.
pretty, but he still moves.
I'm still pretty. I'm still pretty. Look at these golden locks. All right, I'll just move the full 8 inches.
All right. Sigvald used all 8 of his inches. Okay, so they're now 16 inches apart.
Yep.
16.
And your
What do you
move
do?
6.
I've got movement 6. I don't think I can roll a 10 off the bat. And
Go on.
you've got movement 4.
Go on.
So I'll move up 3.
Ooh, okay.
Ooh,
So they're
tasty.
13 inches away.
Yeah, 13 inches away. I'll need a 7 to make the charge.
Yeah, okay. So
I need
a stupidity check.
nine
Yeah,
for
stupidity check.
stupidity. I'm not stupid.
You're not
All
dumb.
right.
I'm gonna charge because I'm
You're gonna charge.
Sigvald, and
all
I'm
right,
just gonna
of course. And you're
crush it.
magnificent.
Boom!
Oh, makes
He
the
makes a
charge
nine.
on a
He makes a
9.
nine.
Nailed it.
We're just gonna move him. We're gonna move him. We'll just move him.
You're
There we
having
go.
some good fun there.
They're
dog.
touching butts.
No, I hate this
With
dude.
assless
I hate
chaps.
Sigvald.
You know, the really cool thing about
Right
the
on.
Shadow Blade figure is he's leaning over the top of,
Yeah, he's
of
He
the
looks like he's
He's not
literally
even
about
leaning,
to
though.
plunge
He's
this
like-
knife
he's
into the
lunging
back.
He's
at him.
lunging over like it's
Yeah.
pretty. It actually looks really cool.
He
I'd like
looks
to get a photo.
We
of
should
that.
get a photo of that because he looks
Yeah.
like he's going to get his knife into Sigvald's back.
Yeah, that's very cool.
Well, I'll take a photo.
yeah, if you
I
can
when
take
I
a
shoot-
proper one in the
Yeah, when
in
I
the
shoot a
light
Shadow
box, yeah.
Blade, I'll do that.
Well, what?
Do you have ASF?
I do, yes. So we're going to go Simo. I'll let you roll first.
Okay, so
Right.
they both have ASF, so simultaneous.
Are you
And-
using your potion this round of combat?
Yeah, I have
Yes,
to.
Oh, you
that's
have
the
to always
answer.
on the-
Yeah. Yeah. Wait, what's your tough? It doesn't matter. All right, so yeah, I'll use my potion of diabolical strength. Put me up at strength 8.
And you've got 4 attacks.
Yeah, I've got 4 attacks. So I got
don't
two-handed weapons.
Weapon skill 10. Oh,
Weapon
right.
skill
Okay.
10.
So you're hitting on 3s.
Hitting on 3s. Let's
No rerolls though.
roll some dice.
All right, go for it. And Shadow Blade rolls and hits with 3 of them.
Three hits.
3
Hits with 3
4s
of
and a
them.
1.
3 4s and a
No
1.
poison though.
No poison.
No poison.
poison.
All right.
Alright.
Rolling to wound.
Why doesn't he doesn't get hatred? Hatred's to wound though, right? Is that what? It
I got
is?
2 6s and a 1, which I'll reroll the
Oh,
1.
that's
6 is
two-
2 killing blows.
That's
Two
two
killing
killing blows.
blows.
2 killing blows
Yeah.
and a wound.
And a wound.
2 killing blows and a wound, and I get no armor save against
No-
this?
No armor save
No
against
armor
killing.
saves.
No, there's no armor save against killing
Against
blow
killing
anyway.
blow.
no
What about
regen
the
against
other
killing
one?
blow.
And,
There is
The-
regen against
No,
killing
there's
blow.
not.
no regen
No,
against
there's not.
killing blow.
Is that true?
Yeah.
There's no armor or ward save.
No, you get
No,
ward
there's ward
saves.
saves.
Ward
There's just no
saves.
regen.
No regen.
Does it say that specifically?
Specifically says
Specifically
no
armor
regen.
and regen.
Okay, so
So-
I'm dead, but let's
The
see.
one-
Is he dead? Is he
Why?
got? Is his
It's
ward save as a
Simon.
regen?
He has regen, yeah.
Is that
Oh.
it? No, like ward save or
No, nothing. Oh,
so
you
you guys,
you chopped off my head.
I know it's gone for a while, but I came back and kicked the shit crap out of Sigvald.
Yeah,
Yeah.
pretty
Mike-
good.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it
so
was
we'll just see if Sigvald kills him
justice.
also.
Okay,
I will
simultaneous
kill
strike
you
back.
also. All right.
Thank God he's dead. That's the important part.
Hold on,
Okay,
hold on,
so-
hold on. Make armor, make a regen against that wound.
The one wound.
The one
The
wound.
one wound.
Nah.
No,
All right.
he
Triple
fails.
dead.
3
Yeah,
killing,
cool.
3 deaths.
Yeah.
Alright. So I'm going to make 7 attacks back at you.
Oh, that's so many.
Tasty.
Oh, yeah, I think you're gonna do it probably.
Not like that.
No.
Only 2 hits.
Only 2 hits.
2 hits. All right.
2 hits.
Okay.
I'm only tough 3.
Took
All right,
3.
so wounding on 2s.
2s. Yeah, strength 5. 2 wounds.
2
Okay,
wounds.
5 upward.
A 5 upward. Alright, nail one of them and you've made it.
All right, 5 upward with Shadow Blade. This is gonna suck if Shadow Blade survives.
Oh no, it'll be fine if he survives.
How's
We've got
gonna
another.
kill him?
Oh well, with a bow from a
Oh, he
distance, he
doesn't
dies.
survive.
He dies.
A 1 and
All
a
right.
2 on his
a
ward
1 and a
saves.
2 on the ward saves.
Alright,
Yeah.
first
Oh,
up.
hold on. He's gonna explode.
There's nothing there to wound.
All right. Strike 3 hit.
There's nothing there to wound.
He
It
does
wounds.
another wound.
It wounds. It wounds.
Insult to
You get an
injury.
armor save. You got this.
No, it rolls a
Fails
1
it.
for his
Regen.
armor save.
You get a regen.
Regen?
Not a single one.
Tom
Alright.
just rolled 2 1s in a
2
row. 1 for
ones in a
armor
row.
save, 1
All
for
right,
regen.
so Sigvald was definitely destined to die tonight,
Yeah.
Yes.
and Shadowblade has unfortunately died as well.
But it's all right because he's a killer, not a leader.
All right, so
Okay,
And he
so we're gonna
killed
take it to
before
heavyweight
filled all
next
of
time,
his
right?
roles.
yeah. So we talked a little bit about what might that we thought this might happen. Just looking at the math, it was pretty good chance that Shadowblade was going to kill him and not survive.
I mean, 50-50 chance with rerolling 1s.
Yeah, you got a
So-
pretty good chance. So what we decided to do was, if they both died simultaneously, we would switch from the lightweight class of infantry into the heavyweight class of monsters and maybe monstrous cav or even potentially some of the heavier weight cavalry models. Who knows? I think what we're looking at for the next pit is, we think we were talking about Durthu.
Durthu for sure.
Durthu from the new Wood Elf book.
Seems
And maybe Throg or somebody similar.
I
We'll
think we
see.
should. We've already. I mean, we just had.
We just
Sigvald
had
from the
Warriors, but-
so I'm thinking either the Brass Bull.
Well, that's going to be a nasty combat for Durthu.
But is there there isn't a model for him, is there?
No, you could just get the regular
Yeah.
Doombull model and sculpt a bit
All
more
right, then
armor on him.
I want another heavyweight, like true special character model.
So
Who do we have?
if you have an idea for
Yeah.
a heavyweight model you'd like to see face off against Durthu. So Durthu is this 3-man special character
We
from the
haven't
new
had a
Wood Elf
demon
book.
yet, have we?
No.
Well, let's just why don't we see what people want
Yeah,
to see
sure.
face off against Durthu.
Somebody
So
big.
yeah, if you want to suggest something, you
Like a
can
blood crusher.
you
Bloodthirster.
can tweet us at Cascade Podcast on Twitter, or you can email us to podcast@dimensionalcascade.com, or log on the forums and get in touch with us there and tell us who you think Durthu should face off against in the inaugural heavyweight pit competition.
Yeah.
I think a great unclean one with tough 7.
Yeah, it's only special characters though, so you'd have to go for the special. What's the special character, great unclean one guy called?
Kolgoth.
Kolgath. Yeah,
Hatred
the
dwarves.
plague father.
Yeah.
Yeah, Durthu also has hatred dwarves.
Yeah, those
They
guys,
probably
those
bond
guys
to get a
suck.
beer or something.
Yeah, right.
So as
It'd
we
be a very
leave,
unclean beer, though.
as we leave the lightweight division behind us, who are you naming your favorite character from the lightweight rounds so far?
My favorite character,
Yeah.
Shadowblade.
Who had the most wins? Did Belagar?
Belagar had the most wins for
more
sure.
Than Sigvald as well.
More than Sigvald.
Yeah, until he met Sigvald.
Until I
Yeah.
met Sigvald, yeah.
I think it's hard to say because we were kind of all over the place with them. Belagar was really hard to unseat for sure. I liked Chakax quite a bit, even though he died very quickly.
Yeah, that was a bad pairing. I think
it was a
for
bad
him.
matchup.
What were the points comparisons to like all the characters?
There is
All
like
over the
a
place.
good spread, yeah, from in the medium 100s up to into the mid 300s, yeah. So
Because Belagar was like 310 or something like that, right?
yeah, and we had him up against like 185 point characters
Yeah.
and stuff. So I mean, it was definitely not a balanced approach to anything, but it was a ton of fun.
Oh, yeah,
Yep.
yeah. Definitely.
So yeah, we'll switch to heavyweights and see where we go from there.
Come on, swinging.
News and rumors.
So for news, this episode we have of course the Wood Elf release that we were talking about last time in our rumors. It came true. Who
Came
knew?
true.
Who knew?
We've had 2 full weeks of Wood Elves.
2 full weeks and no further weeks.
No more Wood Elves.
Yeah, no more Wood Elves.
How sad.
Yeah, very sad. So let's talk about what's new. The new Tree-Man kit, which we mentioned before, which makes Tree-Man, Tree-Man Ancient, and Durthu. There's the Araloth special character. I think, again, we mentioned him before.
Yeah.
Lord level character, new to the fluff. They released the battle magic cards for high magic and dark magic. A bunch of painting guides in digital format. The digital book, the regular rule book, and the special edition rule book, all released. And then the stuff that's currently on pre-order, but will be available, I guess, tomorrow after our recording time. So that's Saturday the 10th. They have a couple of big sets.
Yeah.
Warriors of Talson, which is like $660 or something like that.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a huge set of, it's a full army.
Okay.
And then Guardians of the Deepwood, which is all Dryads and Treemen. And then the usual shenanigans that they do with the paint collections and the basing, here's our stuff
Sure.
prepackaged for you. The really neat stuff that we hadn't seen last time, they have a dual kit between Wildwood Rangers and Eternal Guard. Wildwood Rangers are new
Great Weapon Infantry.
great weapon, light armor infantry. Eternal Guard are stubborn core units from the previous book.
Yep.
We're going to leave the book review for once we've had a few more battles with the Wood Elves, either with them or against them.
Mm-hmm.
And so the last 2 new units that they released, another dual kit of Sisters of the Thorn and the Wild Riders.
The Prancing Stags.
The Prancing Ponies. Yes, they
Which
are
great
indeed.
models.
They are amazing looking
Yeah,
models.
they are amazing models.
I love the Eternal Guard too.
I
They
think
really are cool.
I think both the new dual kits look pretty good.
Agreed.
And as far as dual kits go, they're the best priced dual kit they've
Yeah,
released
yeah,
in
yeah.
years.
Priced.
Yeah, $39 for the infantry, 10 infantry, and $37 for 5 cavalry.
Yeah.
Now,
That's pretty good.
there's some speculation about, did they drop the prices because they learned their lesson from Dark Elves,
With
or
witch elves.
or did they drop the prices because they thought that nobody was going to buy them if they didn't because it's Wood Elves?
Was it? They kind of came like the
It's hard to
Dark
say.
Elves was the highest
the
they've
pinnacle,
gone.
yeah.
The $60 for 10. Like Dwarfs, they came down and kept both of those dual infantry kits at 50,
Yeah,
and now dropping this down to 40. I mean, it's definitely going in the right direction.
yeah, for
I
sure.
know. And I guarantee there's more plastic in these Wood Elves than there is in the dwarves.
Sure.
But still, I
just wonder with the Dark Elves, did they consider them to be like particularly impressive? They were like obviously
don't
some of the
know.
most dynamic models
they
they've
had
ever
boobs.
made, and they have nice boobs.
I'm wondering if
Boobs.
I wonder if they let their development cost because you can tell they put probably a lot of time and a lot more energy into the modeling of the Dark Elves.
I think so too.
And I think that they're letting that affect their prices too much instead of trying to spread those costs out across the whole
range. They're
Oh,
like, this
yeah.
kit took our designers a crap ton of
Yeah.
time, so that's the expensive one.
Yeah, the thing is that all this does
speculation.
is cause strife in the community.
Mm-hmm.
All Dark Elf players are grumpy.
Well,
that-
you pick a price point and you work at that price point. It's not like the cost of producing the sprue really changes from model to
once
model.
the sculpt is done, all the
Yeah,
prices
Exactly.
would be constant.
So, and it could be, there's definitely strong things to suggest that the Wood Elf book was done last year rather than this year, and the sculpts were done ahead of the book, and that the book, was kind of just reorganized to come out at this point. So it could be that they looked at it and said, well, these have been sitting around for ages, and we've changed the price point. Who the heck's going to know? I mean, certainly Games Workshop will not tell us.
Sure.
And at the end of the day, it's good for me. So I'm not going to
Yeah,
complain.
you and your true flight arrows.
Yeah, so I have 4 boxes of those Cavalry on order.
Oh,
I think they're the high point of the release for me.
Yeah, I
I
like
love
them.
the Wild Riders.
I want
so
to take
good.
the
The
Eternal
little
Guard,
raspberry heads.
but switch the heads with the Rangers. That's what I want.
I love the hoods of the
Yeah.
Rangers.
Because
That's
that would
for sure.
that would fit with my winter theme
Right.
really well. I could
Yep.
put the fur on there.
Yeah, the Rangers look like they're carrying the Klingon batleths.
I know, I love it
That's
though.
so
I think
cool.
it's so
Nice.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting variation on the great weapon. It's
Yeah.
like, well, we can have a big sword or a big axe or a batleth. Yeah.
Woo!
All right,
All that
so
clear cutting.
so that's the Wood Elf releases. I found that the White Dwarf for each one. I mean, the first one was fun because it was exciting. Here's the Wood Elves, yay, they're coming, and we're starting to see the rules and spoilers and all of that sort of stuff. The second one, I mean, aside from the spoilers for the new cavalry units, like
They had the Sisters of Thorn rules in there.
Sisters
right?
of Thorn rules in there, but the battle report was so boring.
Yeah,
I
the
mean-
new battle reports in Weekly White Dwarf should not even
They're not
garner that name.
No, they're not battle reports.
Yeah.
It's basically just people's. I don't even know if they fight those battles.
Yeah, it's just some photos and people saying, "Wow, we had fun and rolled dice."
And the new stuff won.
yeah,
Always.
To be fair, Tom and I did fight a Wood Elf versus Beastmen battle.
yeah, we did.
And
How did that go?
He's just gonna
That
keep
didn't-
bringing it up, isn't he, Tom?
I can't help it that I tabled you on turn 3. I
Yeah, it was a pretty grim day for the Beast Man.
mean,
Charging wizards. Who
it
knew?
was a yeah. We will go into more detail on that, I guess, when we're doing our review.
Sure.
So like the Dwarf book, I think we'll leave our review for probably another month or so. and then go into detail.
Yeah.
But what we will do between now and then is for our Art of War section, at least we'll cover some of the tactics that are likely to be of relevance to the Wood Elves, but they'll be relevant to other armies as well. But at least that way, we won't have to cover them as part of the army review.
Sure.
Okay, that I think wraps up our news and rumors section. Did I miss anything? Don't think so.
Nah.
All right.
I can't think of
40k
anything.
players get another whole game already or something. I don't know.
I don't know.
Probably, yeah.
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 Whatever.
Whatever.
Oh, there was the whole Forge World not promoting any. So they released the Dread Sauron.
Yes,
out
that's
now.
right.
So you should be able. I think that's now off pre-order, and you can actually just order it now. It's a pretty cool model. It's going to be huge. It's going to take up most of your deployment zone, probably.
Where's the table?
You ordered one, didn't you, Ricky?
I have not. No,
Oh, you didn't?
I'm trying to find the budget to order it if I'm going to, but I might actually just order some more squigs because
Because you can't have too many
Yeah.
squigs.
Why not?
you can't have too many squigs. But so Lizardman players, there's that for you. But then there's some pretty, well, they're rumors, and since this is news and rumors, let's just say the rumor is that Forge World is finally going to discontinue
Warhammer Forge.
Warhammer Forge. Not it's unclear that they're going to discontinue all the models that they have already.
Yeah, it
I
just
doubt
seems like
that they
they're
would
not
do.
gonna-
I doubt they would do that. I just
Yeah.
bet they're not going to develop anything more.
Yeah.
Probably.
That's the rumor I've seen as well.
Yeah, probably just because they're not Space Marines.
Sure. I don't think they'll stop selling what they've already developed
No,
because
I think people
think-
still buy it, but
They
just
have to
not at
invest
the
in it.
numbers they hope.
Right.
Interesting. They have the Merworm on pre-order. I don't know how long that's been on pre-order for. That's a dark elf monster.
It's a everything monster.
It's an
Yeah,
everything
it's just a
monster, but
Monsters
it's from
Arcanum thing.
it's from around Nagaroth. That's why
Okay.
I'm just
Mm.
saying. It's a great big beastie,
a big sea beastie.
a big sea beastie.
But they probably would have done better if they hadn't invested all of their Warhammer time in making these big beasties that nobody can.
Nobody
really use
takes
in
because
their
cannons take
army.
them off on the.
Well, also
Hey.
they're not even allowed in most tournaments and games. They're all stuff for like the
Yeah.
Monstrous Arcanum book,
Yeah.
which
Only a
people play
few.
with in friendly games, and some tournaments allow, but it's not really standard issue.
Yeah. So, random aside here, and it's kind of
Okay.
related, is so I listen to a bunch of podcasts while I commute, and one of the ones that I listen to is by the head designer at Wizards of the Coast for Magic the Gathering, which is a card game. And he's been there at Wizards for like 20 years near on. So, he's seen that whole phenomenon evolve and develop. And one of the things that he talks about is how early on they realized that if they didn't have organized play as part of their hobby, as part of their game system, that the whole thing would just fall down.
Yeah.
And so what I really worry about is that Games Workshop has abandoned organized play. Right? They came out and said, I think it was last year, that they're no longer going to do any tournaments or sponsor any tournaments across the world. I think the only thing they do is like one tournament a year or similar.
They do a lot at Pugman's Brewery.
Right. In
Yeah.
Nottingham,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Which is basically like saying, well, we've got a local game store
Yeah.
here
We're
at
a
our
massive
factory.
multinational company, and we have one store where we'll
where
put
we're-
on actual
Exactly.
tournaments.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so now they have all of these game stores or hobby centers, whatever they call them, that don't run tournaments. They have no support for local game stores to run tournaments and no incentive for tournaments to be run. And in fact, a game system that makes it kind of difficult to run tournaments because, it's somewhat ambiguous in places. And yet tournament play is what most hobbyists want. And this organized play.
And what drives
And
collections?
what drives
and-
collections,
Right.
what drives sales, what makes you push your hobby onward and outward is organized play. So I guess my real question is, why the hell did they do that? I mean, what must have been going through their minds to say, "Oh, we're not doing organized play anymore"?
LSD.
LSD.
Probably. Yeah.
It's probably going through their minds.
I mean, did they just Did they just see that there was like a big indie GT scene developing and people organizing their own tournaments and thought, we're not needed, we can step back and just provide the rules and the models and this will be self-sustaining?
That could be it. But, that I think that that doesn't make a ton of sense. Because
No.
because
But it's GW.
well, one of the things that they enforced at their sanctioned tournaments was, you had to have the rule book, you had to have the army book, you had to use Games Workshop models, right?
Yep.
Really?
Yeah. By enforcing all of that, you're saying, okay, there's a certain amount of product you must buy from our company.
A buy-in.
Now, with independent GTs, you have you might have a sportsmanship hit if you don't have a rule book. But, I've seen people turn up without their rule book.
Yeah, all the time.
And likewise, without their army book, without, whatever else they need. And tons of alternative models. I mean, I'm all for that. But from a business perspective, I don't understand what they gained by shutting that down. In my mind, and I'm going to stop this rant after I make this point. Maybe I need a whole rant section because I have a few of them in my brain. but in my mind, what they really should have done, if they were intent on they've shut down battle bunkers pretty much across the board. Really, what they should be doing is they should shut down their retail division. They should just eliminate all of those stores from a business perspective and support the local game store with organized play.
Have some kind of
promote tournaments,
traveling representatives kind of thing.
They've already got that whole thing in place.
Oh, they do?
They have that whole thing in place. And what they don't have is the ability to support the tournaments, right? Wizards give you
incentive for people to actually play.
Wizards give you software to manage all of that sort of stuff and report results, and you can see how you rank up against other players in the country.
Yeah.
How cool would that be?
But if they're gonna run like
Event-only
GW tournaments, but in like not their own physical premises, can they still impose rules like you have to use GW models and stuff?
Oh yeah.
Or will that be?
Yeah, absolutely. They
If they're
can.
providing prize support,
just
I guess,
like
then,
Wizards of the Coast does with Magic cards. You can't use printed out your own Magic cards, right? The store is responsible for enforcing it. And so and this is how I believe that Privateer Press are doing things, right? They don't have their own hobby stores,
right?
But they have support for the local game store to run tournaments. And so Games Workshop is literally having its lunch eaten by this smaller startup from Seattle who are beating them at their own game, at least when it comes to organized play. Anyway, end of rant.
No, I mean, it's a valid point.
It drives me bonkers because I want to see that level of organized play. That's why I got involved with the U.S. Masters. It's like, I want there to be a competition that says, who's the best?
Right.
That's why we all play, right? That's why we want to.
That's why I started Sparkle
This is what
Party.
I was saying. Maybe like GW are just sitting back laughing, like watching everybody putting in so much effort to get this going themselves, while GW don't have to.
I can't see it. It feels like a misstep rather than a deliberate step. And all I can hope is that somebody somewhere changes their mind and fixes things. Maybe when they get a new CEO, they're still with an interim CEO. So. Let's wait and see.
Hopefully a CEO who actually plays games.
Yeah, that'd be good.
The Tournament Zone.
Okay, so we have a few tournaments to call out in the Tournament Zone this episode. The first one up is a charity tournament in Olympia. So this is a Warhammer for Life charity tournament. It's a one-day event on June 21st. Oh, that's the solstice, isn't it? June 21st?
Yes.
Yeah.
Perfect for Wood Elf.
Yeah. Does that mean he gets like some kind of special reroll or something?
He's going to reroll everything.
I'll have to bring Orion for that,
Oh, geez.
Don't play basic lands.
Okay. And so this is it's a fundraiser for the American Cancer Society Relay for Life. It's being run by one of the Dimensional Cascade forum members. So It is, let me see, I've got the details here in front of me. It is $15 per person or $20, which gets you a one-time tournament reroll. So you get pay an extra $5, get a reroll. So I encourage you to buy the $20 ticket. Yeah,
Yeah, for Dimensional Cascade.
yeah. You need to reroll those dice so you get your Dimensional Cascade,
Exactly.
right?
I know. I roll a 7. No.
Wait, do you actually
no.
get like a free reroll?
You get a free reroll for the tournament. One reroll.
Is
for
it
an
one
extra
reroll
$5.
per $5?
really?
Can you buy in for like $500?
Yeah,
Just rerolling
Reroll
everything.
all the days.
you get one reroll. That's amazing.
Yeah. So actually, for charity events, I'm all about selling
Sure.
rerolls.
Yeah.
Right? You know, if you sell rerolls for $5 a pop,
It'd be
you
cool to auction
you
off a
will
magic
raise-
weapon before the event.
Like the fell blade.
or $20 for a reroll on that heirloom chart from the
Yeah.
White Dwarf. You know,
Ooh.
Yeah, for a charity event.
why
I'd
not?
be all
Yeah,
for it.
That'd be
yeah,
good.
yeah. Anyway, so that's down in Olympia. For those of you who are not in Washington State, Olympia is our capital.
Woo!
And it's being run at Olympic Cards and Comics. So if you are interested in that, you can check out Dimensional Cascade Forum and have a look in the battlegrounds. You'll see Warhammer for Life charity
Is it
tournament.
2,500 points?
It's 2,500 points. There's 26 spots available. So it's a reasonable size tournament. It's
Is
a
it-
1-day.
Is it comped at all?
It is not
There's
comp.
just 4 special
I think
characters.
it's Wet
I
Coast
think, that are
comp,
not
actually.
allowed.
Is it? Is it four?
I think he did Wet Coast comp so that people could test their list for Wet
I think
Coast.
the
That's right.
Hellebron is not allowed.
And
Yeah. No Helebron, no Epidemius, no
It's like my last two armies.
no Teroecho, and no, who's the other broken one?
I don't know. There's 4.
Oh no Alariel. I don't get that.
Oh yeah, I
one.
don't get that either.
Yeah.
But no Alariel.
Mm.
Okay, those are the 4 you're not allowed.
There you go.
Wow.
Somebody had a bad game against Lariel. And just
Like,
hoping to
yeah.
crack.
Threw all their toys out of the pram and went home crying.
Yeah.
Okay, so that is in, like I said, that's in. Well, it's technically in Lacey. Washington was down by Olympia.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Tickets are on sale now, actually.
Yeah,
too,
they are.
So,
Yeah, they can click through and buy the tickets from our website.
yep.
So that's a good cause. Speaking of Wet Coast GT, that's coming up just a week after the Warhammer for Life tournament. That's a 2-day GT. This is one of the qualifiers for the U.S. Masters. Bum, bum, bum. So if you are a Pacific Northwest region tournament player, that is one of the 2-day events where you can earn your points. This is the first one that we've had since we announced the Northwest region for the Masters. So that's pretty exciting. I know from our forum, I've seen at least 6 people sign up from the Seattle area to go up there.
Yeah.
So we'll be bringing a bit of a posse, so that'll be fun.
This is my one chance to qualify.
Do it, Mickey.
You got this.
Everyone
Nail it. You
everyone
got
has
this.
2 chances, right?
Got
The
this.
grinders gets everybody at the end. Yeah, cool. So that's another 2,500 point battle. Again, just that same comp with those 4 special characters. And you can check that out on wetcoastgt.com.
Yeah.
So those are the 2 immediate ones, or most imminent. The other one we wanted to talk about is the OFCC team tournament.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not happening until September.
What does the CC stand for? An OFCC?
One of them's champion or
All right.
championship, and I don't. Ordo Fanaticus is the OF,
Sure.
which is the forum at ordofanaticus.com. But I'm not really sure. Maybe somebody will tell us.
Combat?
I could probably Google for it, but I'm too lazy.
Yeah.
TLDR.
So OFCC, they're running a team championship, which kind of is like similar to the ETC in that you go as a team, but you play individual battles, and you have a team captain who works with the other team captain to decide which of the pairings are going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So after pairings have been decided, is it like all resolved at once and every member from every team like faces the opposing team?
Yeah,
Or is
Yeah.
it... Okay.
yeah. So
Yeah.
we'll basically play 4
4
simultaneous battles.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's
Against
cool.
another team.
Yeah, so we're going as a podcast
Yeah,
team.
we're going as a team. We've
Yeah.
got a
That's
spot. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
exciting.
And
We're gonna-
Tom is our leader.
yeah, big responsibility here.
Yep.
That
Don't
is,
mess
I
it
was
up.
reading through the response. I have to like check your math on your lists and stuff to
With-
make sure you're not
with
cheating
Grey
and
Dwarf.
slipping in an extra squig here or there.
Just a few. I'm just going to sprinkle a few
Just
squigs.
hiding squigs up his sleeves. Whoa!
I don't know where those came from.
That's a
With
legitimate
great dwarf.
gobbling tactic.
That's for
That was
sure.
great responsibility.
Yeah. So we're coming out in force. We're gonna have the night goblins, the wood elves, the dark elves, and the chaos dwarfs.
Yep. Yeah, that's exciting.
I just
Dream
have to learn how to
team.
beat demons of all kinds.
Leave the
Yeah.
demons to me.
all chaos
Okay.
stuff.
Sounds good.
Oh, sure. So I'll just do.
Just give me the ones that you guys think nobody else can win against, and I'll just die. You're like,
But do look good doing it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna die anyway, so I might as well die against the hard people, right?
Throw you under the bus.
Yeah.
Sacrificial goblin.
Exactly.
So the reason we bring that up is lists are due by July 1st. So you've got about 6 weeks or so to make lists. They have an interesting composition.
They have a very interesting comp system. So
Yeah.
there's no... Well, there is a little amount of kind of specific comp, like army-wide restrictions.
Yeah.
But they're not very intense. The main part of the comp is that the lists go and get reviewed by some kind of independent... Well, they're not independent judges, are they? They're going to be some of the players who are going to be playing there.
Yeah, it's a panel of judges.
It's a panel of judges.
Some of whom are players, some are tournament organizers.
Sure, so they're going to assess the lists for kind of balance, make sure it's not kind of a nasty kind of trick tournament list.
Yep, they're looking for net lists.
Yeah, they're just looking for overall balance, and I think in this tournament the focus seems to be on your opponent in setting up games where both players are going to have a fun time.
Yep.
So it's looking for lists that are going to, promote...
Wreck people's hobby.
The robots will decide that maximum fun has been
So you're
achieved.
supposed to submit lists that are going to be conducive to kind of balanced, fun games.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it is a numerical comp that they assign
Sure.
to it,
Right.
and then that
there's-
gets applied based on how you've won. You
Right.
multiply.
Yeah, well, they assign you a number between 1 and 5, with 1 being a very light, very kind of weak list. Anything that they would give below a 1, they'll just turn back to you and say this list is so weak that it's not even going to be fun to play against. So submit another list. And then 5 will be the kind of strongest list they would allow in the tournament. You're supposed to produce a list that you think will come somewhere around a 3. That's the goal, apparently. And then, so you just score the battle in points difference as normal, and then divide your winning margin by your comp. So if you have a very strong list that has a comp of 5 and you win the game by 1,000 points, that only actually counts for 200 points.
Okay.
Yeah,
Oh.
it works like that.
So having a weaker list is somewhat beneficial, but they want basically everyone to be in and around a 3.
They want you to strive for 3. Yeah.
And so this will be interesting. This is the first time I've done subjective comp like that, and it's subjective with a number associated with it that actually
Sure.
affects the outcome of the battle.
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to be interesting because, certainly as team captain, you're going to be looking at it saying, well, Aiden's list is a 3.6, and let's see, what else have I got that's what are we up against that won't screw the scores up too much,
Right.
even if he wins a 20-0 or wins it or gets beaten. I don't know how that's all going to affect the game.
Right.
Are the numbers released already, or is it like you send it in and it gets evaluated and they give you back a number? Or is there anything like you can compare ahead of time before you send it?
No,
No, you're just going to send it in and just get a number that then you're stuck with.
Yeah,
So
it's entirely
I
I
subjective.
think we need to do a lot of cross review of lists kind of thing
Yeah,
to just
definitely.
think like, is this going to be a real pain to play against?
Yeah.
Are the judges likely to think this
It's
is
I think it's interesting
a
that
nasty list?
they won't allow special characters, but then they allow things like Dogs of War and Scrolls of Binding.
Yeah, Monstrous
So,
Arcanum and
yeah,
stuff.
but only a few specific things. So it's kind of like a hit or miss what they're allowing people to take, and when they're trying to. They said the goal was to be fluffy, and then.
But
kind
they
of
don't let you
remove-
take Skarsnik.
And then they remove a lot of the fluff characters.
Well, and here's the other thing. They have said that they will allow exceptions on a per request basis. So I think, I would be perfectly willing to kind of request exception for
Yeah,
Skarsnik
Skarsnik.
for a Night Goblin
If you
themed
take a photo
army.
of that army and be
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
Skarsnik leads this army.
Yeah, of
Yes,
course.
then
I think we
yeah.
should.
I think we
let's
should.
ask. What's the worst that'll happen? They'll
Skarsnik
say
will
no.
Squid Gobbas, right?
Yeah.
Skarsnik is not renowned as a broken character.
You
No.
just gotta sneeze on him and he
Yeah.
dies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And either way, you're bringing that model. So,
Yeah.
all right. So that's OFCC team
Super
championship.
excited though.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
they have an open 3,000 point one player open the Friday before that, and
Yeah.
that is part of the U.S. Masters circuit. That's another 1-day tournament.
okay.
Yeah.
For those of you who are in Oregon or who want to travel up or into Oregon to experience that.
You're playing in that?
I am. I bought my tickets already for that.
Are you playing
Because
in
it's
that?
3,000 points and it's like absolutely anything goes. So,
I don't know if I'm playing in that because I would have to take a day off work, and I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Maybe. Having now won my 1-day tournament, I got to give everybody else a chance. Yeah.
right. Rub
no.
it in.
No.
3 days of Warhammer
Aiden,
sounds a
you
little
start power
intense to me
gaming
as
and
well.
you win, so you box everyone else out.
Yeah, I can't do it, man.
I know. I'm gonna have
I'm
to
just
eat
too
my
nice a
Wheaties
guy.
to
If you
go
make
3 days.
everyone else quit the hobby, then you'll automatically be the master, right?
I'll give you a crown.
Yeah. Thanks. Okay. So that was the Warhammer for Life tournament, Wet Coast, OFCC. So the last one we want to mention.
Closer to home.
Yep. Sparkle Party Deathmatch 4.
Yeah, Sparkle Party Deathmatch for Sparkle Party like it's $2,099.
$29.99.
$29.99. Yeah. So tickets are on sale now. Go to spdm.eventbrite.com and you can buy your tickets for Sparkle Party for $20. Gets you in the door. It's a 1-day tournament at Seattle Center this time instead of Card Kingdom. So neutral area. The facility's pretty cool. It's right there in central Seattle. So anybody who hasn't been to Seattle before, it's a pretty spot to be. Especially if you bring significant others or whatever, and they want to go see parts of the city. They are literally right in the tourist center part of it.
It's
Yeah,
right
it's-
across the street from the Space Needle.
Yep,
Yeah,
exactly.
It's under the Space Needle, really. So, but
It's a big Space Needle.
yeah, it is.
Meet under the Space Needle.
Who knew?
Yeah. So, what else should? Oh, so the $29.99 is the points value. So 1 point short of Grand Army. I just did that just to kind of keep it real, and but you're still allowed to bring basically anything that Games Workshop deems as an official rule, which is scrolls of binding, sorceress packs, all those things you're allowed to bring. You're encouraged to bring. We're doing the painting contest again. This time I'm going to offer a first, second, and third place in the painting contest. We're going to make it a little more official. And the contest is for anything that is a bound or a scroll of binding. So there's some things that are units, some things that are characters, some things that are monsters that are scrolls of binding. So that could be from the Storm of Magic or the
Monstrous
Arcanum. So either of those books, anything in there is free to paint. Like Tom already has a Kadai that's part of his Chaos Dwarf army. But it's technically a scroll of binding, so
it can be taken as a scroll.
Yeah,
of
because
binding,
it can be
so.
taken as a scroll, and he hasn't entered it as a painting thing in any of the previous Sparkle parties. He could enter that.
If he got off his butt and painted.
Yeah, if he actually painted it. Yeah, so
it's going to be painted to perfection.
So the same holds true for anybody else. So that's a $50 cash prize. I'm hoping the painting contests eventually I'll be able to start giving larger cash prizes for that.
You know what would be a cool
I think
prize
it'd
as
be
well,
pretty fun.
rather than just cash prize, is if you could offer to, like, whatever model wins, if you could take that model and take some of your fancy photos of them, do a little photo shoot, like, and then, like, post one on your Tale of Paters or something. I don't know if you're allowed to post other people's models on there.
Yeah, they would be open to that.
It would be pretty cool to,
That'd be
that
awesome.
The prize, like a photo shoot for
First,
your
second,
model.
and third that would be fantastic if you just did it for the top 3.
Yeah.
That'd be really
awesome.
good. Yeah.
So I would love to have some cool photos taken of one of my models.
Yeah, my photos tend to
My
be.
photos suck.
Let me get my phone out. Snap, snap, snap. That's good enough. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be definitely doable for sure.
Cool.
That'd be awesome. I mean, I won't win, but that'd be awesome.
So, other than that, I think the next episode of this podcast we will reveal the first scenario. Keep in mind the scenarios are going to be a little simpler this time because with the increased points, I didn't want it to become too complicated.
Be really swiggy.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so,
How much do I have to pay for a reroll at your tournament?
$200 cash to me,
Yeah.
and whether or not I actually tell you, it's I don't know. See me after the podcast. What's that? Yeah.
All right. So on that shiny, happy note, I think that kind of wraps up our tournament zone for this episode.
The Hobby Horse.
Okay, we're going to talk about green stuff for the second time. The first time had to be edited out, I'm afraid, folks. So, just reading the description of it here, it says it's a 2-part modeling putty that is useful for filling in gaps on models and sculpting additional details. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about. So it's kind of obvious, what it's used for, but how to use it, that's something that I think takes a bit of instruction, takes a bit of time and experimentation, and we're hoping to kind of share our experiences and shortcut some of the problems that you might run into with using green stuff for the first time, or even help you get over some of the issues you might have had with it. So I'm going to tell a war story here a little bit. So I was a red shirt at Games Workshop in the UK in the mid 90s, and the first time I saw green stuff was actually somebody sculpting a model for Warhammer in the studio. So GW didn't sell it at the time, and it was pretty hard to come by. At least in Belfast, there were only a few modeling shops, and nobody stocked it. So that was my introduction.
So nobody really did like detailed conversions back then. People just kind of stuck their models together and.
Yeah, and you got, everything was lead. So the conversions that you would get were usually, lead models.
Sure.
Yeah.
For your children.
Write with them later.
Yeah, well, yeah, you could. I did. I was a teenager. It's like, hey, I can write with this. This is fun.
But even if people were building their big lead models back then, there must have been like gaps to fill. And
Yeah,
stuff, because
there
the
were, and
metal
there
kits
were
are the
other
worst for that.
putties.
Okay.
And we might talk about some of them tonight. But none of them were quite as
green
or as flexible. And nowadays, like you see,
stuffy.
works in progress posted on Twitter or on people's blogs or forums, and half the time, 80% of the model is covered in this kind of dark green morass of detail. And that's green stuff. So cover the basics really quickly. It's a 2-part putty. 1 part is blue, 1 part is yellow.
Blue plus yellow
equals green.
Green.
Now you might think that's really straightforward. It comes in two general forms. If you buy it from Games Workshop, it comes in a ribbon. One half of the ribbon is blue, the other half of the ribbon is yellow.
Yeah.
And the problem with that is that right away the blue touching the yellow has started to cure. And so in that ribbon, along the join, you have slightly cured green stuff. And so as soon as you buy it from Games Workshop or anyone else that sells it in ribbon format,
it's not just GW.
you need to separate it and keep the 2 parts separate. That's generally the best way to store it.
When I cut my bit off to use, I just cut a slice off and then slice the blue and the yellow both
in the middle
near the divide, and
that's
just
what I
take
do
the
too.
2 bits and mix them together.
Yep,
Throw away that middle bit.
That's definitely another way to do it.
Because you can tell, like if you just take that slice and start mixing it all together, after a while you find
There's a lump.
There's just this lump in the middle that you're kind of feeling over and over again.
Yeah. So either way, you got to discard that part and stop using it. The other way that it comes is you'll get it in a plastic tube that has a separator in it, or it's 2 tubes, and it's a blue and a yellow. Now,
Or a white and a gray.
or a white and a gray. It's a 2-part epoxy either way. One is one of the parts, and don't ask me which one. I think it's the blue one in the green. Is the
Hardener.
the hardener, and so you can use less or more, and that will make your green stuff either harden quicker or harden slower.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
But if you don't get enough, then it's just going to never
It's
settle.
never going to harden. Yeah. So really you're aiming for 50% or you might go a little more or a little less. But you don't want to go too much, otherwise it's just plasticine at that
Sure.
point, pretty much.
So how long are we looking after we've mixed it together before? What's your window before it starts to
I
become harder
noticed.
to work with?
I usually think about half an hour is
Yeah.
pretty good, and then after that it starts to get pretty
Obviously, it
firm.
takes a long time to actually set, but
Right.
you can tell if you're doing a kind of long session with it that it's becoming like harder and harder to
Yeah,
work with.
yeah.
Yep.
I usually don't do anything more than I can do in half an hour, and then
Mm-hmm.
and then if it, I just throw it out otherwise. But usually the models are so small that it's tiny little bits that you need anyway.
Sure.
So,
Yep.
but yeah, anything after half an hour is usually, it won't stick to itself or to other stuff as well after that long.
Yep.
And but sometimes you do want it a little harder when you're working with it, so maybe you do let it set a little while before
Sure.
you use it.
So actually, this is a good point. I mean, why do you want to have the putty to be harder or softer?
Well, if you're trying to do a lot of fine detail, then you're going to want, if you're doing, let's see, if you're filling gaps, softer for sure.
Mm-hmm.
If you're trying to build structure, you're going to want it firmer. So if you're trying to build something up, say you're trying to do a face, say you're trying to add a long sword or something like that to your model, and you're trying to do it out of green stuff, even though there might be better ways to do that. But say you're doing that, then you might want it firmer at that point. So, and anytime you want it to hold a sharp edge, you probably want to let it firm up a little bit.
Yeah, that's definitely what I've noticed. If you want a flat surface, like something that is like beaten flat, like a sword or a shield or anything like that, then I find it when it's a little firmer, it's easier to get into the flat surface and to get a sharp edge on it. I find it when it's softer, it's definitely better for doing like hair and fur and things where you want that kind of more natural,
more organic,
and to it. Branches and stuff like that for tree folk. I've done a bunch of those too. Okay, so that's that side, and yeah, so you just unfortunately with a lot of these things, it's a little bit of trial and error, but you can use a surprisingly small amount to try out. And so you can make just a little and add a little more blue, and then add a little less blue, and experiment and get a feel for it. Okay, so that's kind of mixing it up. Now working with it, one of the tricky parts with it is it's not water soluble. So it's not
which is
something,
nice.
yeah, which is good. But occasionally, especially as it's when it starts to get a little firmer, it can be a pain in the butt to work with. It starts to stick to your tools, and so do you use anything to work with that's like to keep it from sticking to your tools?
Spit.
You spit on it?
I'm literally just touching it to my tongue the whole time I'm working.
Huh.
Now,
Your tool?
yeah. Yeah, I'm always just wetting it in my mouth, just like I do every time when I paint. I'm always pulling the tip of my brush to a point.
I do that as well.
So it's the same thing for me. I'm just touching my tool to my tongue. But so I did some of those online courses with Fire for Effects Studios, and he's one of those pro sculptors that's all he does for a living is sculpt miniatures now, and I took some of his classes, and one of them, one of the things that he talks about is instead of doing, spit, which obviously probably isn't good to be licking your tools. I mean,
Advice for life.
yeah, just
don't lick your tools.
don't lick your tools, guys.
Don't eat paint.
Yeah, so he uses Vaseline a little bit. He coats his tool with just a little bit of Vaseline.
Yep.
And I think that's...
You don't find a little bit of water just works all right?
Water doesn't work very well.
Water, I think you need to break the surface tension of water because it tends to just bead on the end of the tool. It's been my experience. I tried that too. And yeah, for some reason saliva doesn't have that surface tension. So that's why I've stuck with that. But I think
What about a little bit of like the mixing medium then?
Lamian medium?
Yeah, something
Well,
like that.
maybe, but who knows what that's, how that's going to affect,
Sure.
Yeah.
subsequent layering. So that's the thing that I was worried about with the Vaseline is if you're, because oftentimes when you're building or, adding things to a model, you have to do an underlayer, let that set and cure before you actually go back and add the detail part of that.
So you do one layer to get a basic shape.
So,
and
yeah,
then kind of
and
work
if you're doing
over.
that with a lot of Vaseline, I guess you could wash it after that.
Yeah.
But that part was never really clear to me in the instructions that I was taking from him.
So, I mean, I've used oil-based stuff. I've used baby oil on it, and that helps keep it really, makes it very easy to get a smooth surface.
Mm-hmm.
So you're talking about putting the baby oil on the green stuff?
On the
or
green
your-
stuff.
Okay.
Well, either way, it ends
On
up
the
being
tool
on
or
the
on-
on the green stuff
Okay.
at some point. But yes, it stops it from sticking to the tool, and then it ends up being on the surface of the green stuff, and it dries up very quickly. So I've done that pretty much for all of the conversions that I've done.
Baby oil. Okay.
Maybe we
Baby
should
oil,
talk about what these tools are that we're dipping into baby oil.
Yeah. So I don't think there's any way we're going to get through talking about green stuff without at least a handful of Snickers here and there. But we'll try and keep it PG as we
We're
go.
already doing much better
we
than
didn't
that.
get through the
We're doing
first
much
one.
better.
Yeah, I know. I
That's
know.
the second take.
I've been
Yeah.
biting my tongue.
Yeah.
Just sitting over there.
Yeah. So the tools. There's a whole bunch of different tools that you can possibly use. So talk about the basics. The wax sculpting tools that are available. They're fairly cheap. You can buy a set of them for $7 or $8.
Yeah, that's what I got. I think it's like the P3 set. It's just like 3 tools,
Yep.
$7 or something.
Yeah.
And for the kind of work I do, it's been working out fine.
Absolutely. I guess the quintessential tool is a dental tool called a wax number 5. And it's a double-ended tool. Most of these tools are double-ended.
Yeah.
So they're about the size of a pencil.
Uh-huh.
They're usually made out of metal, and they have very clean edges or sharp points, which help you work with this. And the wax number 5 is kind of like a scimitar blade at one end. It's kind of curved, and then as it comes to a point, and you can use that for creating flat surfaces and also for some fine detail work.
That's pretty cool.
And then at the opposite end, it's a very fine point, a bit like a flattened needle. So you can poke with it, but it's also got a little bit of depth, so you can move stuff around with it. And if you just had to have one tool, that is probably the best one to work with.
The needly one?
That wax
that whole
5
tool.
that whole tool. You can do most effects with that one
So
tool.
my favorite tool that I use, it's like on one end, it's kind of the blunt knife point kind of thing.
Yep.
But with a little point on the end. I'm not describing that very well. And then on the other side, it's like just a very kind of blunt, flat surface that I use for like smoothing stuff afterwards with.
Yep.
Yeah.
So one end I can actually put the detail in with, and then just flip it around and kind of smooth things down to make them,
Yep, for
make
sure.
them look better.
So those are the basic tools to use. If you want to get a bit more, like a lot of people will use a needle as well. To be able to, especially if you're doing like mail or something that requires
Incredible amounts of precision.
very precision, like eyes.
I definitely never done anything like that.
No, and eyes
That'd be
are
intense.
particular. Just like with painting, eyes are very tricky.
Sure.
And also because they're what we look at as human beings,
Yep.
right? We pick up the model, we look at the eyes. So if you mess them up, you've messed up the whole model.
That's why I never bother
It's a
painting
focal
the
point.
eyes.
Yeah.
Just leave the wash in there.
But the tricky part of the needle is that it's such a small thing to work with.
Yeah. I have something that I like to use, and it's actually a folding stylus. They're for creasing paper, and so it's another double-ended tool that has about a 2-point like ball on the end, on one end, and then another like half point ball on the other, and they're just little styluses that you would use to kind of dent paper or stuff like that, and they're perfect for that detail work because there's actually a little ball on the end of what is the needle, and I like that for working with them. It's great for chain mail or working stuff into fill gaps too. You can just kind of run that ball back and forth, and it squishes it down in there.
Interesting.
So maybe we should talk a little bit about what level of tasks we've actually all done with this. It sounds like Ricky has done.
Before we go into that, I just want to cover kind of a last way of handling the tools, and that is to build your own.
Okay.
This is actually not
Ship
as
style.
it's not as difficult or as crazy as it sounds. To build, you're basically using paper clips for most of it for the blade end, and you cut a piece of paper clip. You drill a hole in a wooden dowel, and glue the piece of paper clip into the dowel. Tape it round. Make a grip for yourself.
Sounds like a shiv. Sounds like something I'd make in
Right.
prison.
A little bit.
Yep.
But then what you can do with the end is you can use needle nose pliers to turn it into whatever shape you want. And then you can file it down to be as flat as you want or as pointed as you want. The tricky part is you got to get it really smooth.
Or it just sticks.
Or just sticks, yeah. And the way to do that, you got to use like wet and dry sandpaper and so forth. But the nice part about that is it's a very cheap way to make tools. I mean, the tools are pretty cheap to begin with, but still, most tools you're going to need to replace because the green stuff will dry out on them, and you'll have to sand it down to get rid of the green stuff. If you don't take exceptionally good care of them, it's very quick that you'll have to replace them. This is a very cheap way to get started. And a lot of sculptors, I mean, I've read a bunch of sculpting blogs and so forth. A lot of sculptors prefer having their own tools because they make exactly the shape that they want.
Yeah.
They make a handle that fits their hand and how they grip. So it's definitely something to look out for. It's pretty easy if you Google for. I'll put some in the show notes. Actually, a couple of articles on how to make your own sculpting tools.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty cool.
And did Ricky have some tools as well you wanted to talk about? The smoothing ones?
Yeah, the smoothing ones. The color they're called color shapers, and they basically they look pretty much exactly like a paintbrush, but instead of a bunch of bristles on the tip, they have little rubber shapes on the tip. Like some of them are little triangle shapes or point shapes or wedges, and they come in different firmnesses.
So the end is very So the end's quite flexible.
Yeah,
generally.
either flexible or pretty. You can get ones that are pretty firm, and they're great for smoothing and doing. So you did this beautiful torso, but now you need to add an arm, and you have to smooth the muscle between. That's what those are good for, is to kind of give you that smooth transition, to kind of pull it gently without having those sharp lines that you might get if you had a hard tool dragging through it.
So that's nice. How much are those? Are they reasonably affordable?
Let's see. I was just looking at them over at Dick Blick, and I think it was the set for about $10.
No, that's pretty good.
And if you watch Dick Blick and sign up there, they often have super good sales every now and then. Oh, so looks like these ones are a little more than that. This is a full set of micro ones. That's 5 with just about every shape you would need for $18.
Well, it's still in the same ballpark.
Yeah, pretty good.
Yeah, that's interesting because one of the problems that I find, a very common problem, especially working with any area larger than larger than pea-sized, is you get fingerprints on the green stuff very easily.
Yeah, and especially if you try and smooth it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's such a sensitive material, it just picks up anything.
Especially if you're really impatient like me and you decide you want to sculpt something on one side and I should sculpt that on the other side right now. And you just turn it around and squish the one side down.
That's the very first thing that you gotta learn is the patience.
Yeah.
When you look at a model that, like all the models that we see, well, the ones that have been coming out lately, the plastic kits, those are all digitally sculpted and sliced up on a computer. They might have done maquettes of those, but they probably didn't do any at the 25 mil size. But the old models that were done with green stuff, like those weren't built in a day. Those were built over months. You know, they would come in and add one chunk of the arm and then come back the next day and do one chunk of, you know, literally building it up almost muscle by muscle. Because when you're working at such a small scale, you know, any point you touch on there affects what you just did, and you just got to take your time with it.
Yeah, and actually that's a really good point, because if you do one piece and you're happy with it, and then you let it dry and cure entirely, and then come back the next day or the next week and do the next part, if you're not happy with it, you can take it off, and what you had there before is still the bit you're happy with. So so it's very forgiving once you've reached that point of happiness, you know, and you've let it cure.
Yeah, and there's certain things that you'll want to do with green stuff that you won't be able to get that both the shape and the detail without first building up an underlayer that you let completely cure and then go back in and add the detail.
Build on top of it again.
Yeah, and so that's where the color shapers come in handy, because you can smooth that thin layer over the underlay and then put your detail into that. Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
That's what you would do when you're doing chain mails, things like that. You want to build the understructure, then go back and do the thin overcoat, and then add the chainmail texture. Because otherwise, every time you stab the needle in there for the chainmail texture, you end up pushing that
changing
thing,
the whole shape. Yeah,
and eventually you end up with this
Deformed
mail shirt that, you know, is looking like a cape because it's gotten pushed so far back. So, yeah,
that's a really good point.
Yeah. So patience with your green.
Patience and layers.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's a little bit about the tools, a little bit about layering, a little bit about you know, how to manipulate the green stuff to begin with. What about let's go through a little bit of kind of what are the common things that you can do with it that are gonna really change how your models look without involving a whole ton of effort and a lot of skill, right? So this is kind of green stuff 101. I want to do conversions.
Right.
I've never done it before, or everything I've done has looked like an abomination. This is why I'm playing Warriors of Chaos. No.
Oh, it's chaos.
Yeah, it's chaos. Anything goes. It's chaos. But
offense. No offense.
yeah. Let's talk a little bit about some of the stuff that you can do.
Kind of the next stage in converting after just doing a kit bash. And
Yeah,
things
exactly.
Like that, taking it to slightly the next level.
Exactly. So, Tom, actually, why don't you start, because you've just done some stuff with your Chaos Dwarves.
Yeah, so one of the first things basically my first big project with green stuff other than filling holes was sculpting a bunch of Chaos Dwarf beards onto some Dragon Ogre models.
Did you get those finished?
I did get them finished. Yeah, I have 6 mighty bull. Nice. So for my bull centaurs for my Chaos Dwarf army, I wanted to use the Dragon Ogre models because I just think they're awesome models. But to make them look more Chaos Dwarfy, they need the iconic like curly ringlet Chaos Dwarf beard. Yeah. So that was my first project with green stuff, and the one thing I learned from that is that obviously practice makes perfect, as with anything. And what really helped me was I got a bunch of just old like ogre sized heads that I wasn't using for anything else, not on the models I actually wanted to finally do, and just started practicing working with green stuff on them.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
You can get better surprisingly quickly. Like the first 2 that I tried just looked god awful, but then after that I started kind of figuring out what works and what doesn't. And I was doing this as a pretty basic sculpt. I basically just get one. It's all done in one stage. I don't do any of this fancy layering or whatever. I would just get one blob of green stuff, kind of mash it onto the face, and shape it into a kind of beard shape coming up the side of the face, and then down into a big ball on the chest, kind of. And then I would just use the tool to cut vertical lines in it to separate it out into the ringlet segments, and then just work a bunch of little cross lines in. And that was the hardest part because it's kind of fine detail working in little cross-hatch lines all the way down the ringlets. And then after that, there was just a lot of kind of pushing everything back into nice shapes, because I guess I suffered from what Ricky just discussed, which is that when you're trying to work detail onto something which is kind of a mass rather than a thin layer, every detail you work in is kind of changing the shape of the whole thing.
Yeah.
So I ended up with these, quite nice details in the ringlets, but the ringlets themselves all kind of out of whack. So I spent a bit of time pushing that all back into place and smoothing it down.
Yep.
And
I think hair is actually one of the easiest things to start with, because it's quite easy to work the green stuff into thin chords,
right,
and it'll stay in that form, and you can very easily smooth it into the hair that exists on a model if it has hair.
So that's something I've done that I would kind of lump under like gap filling, is that sometimes there's gaps that need to be filled, but you have to make it look seamless, you need to put either some like scales on there if it's that kind of beast, or like just add some hair to it or something.
Yep.
So yeah, just
that's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, that's pretty straightforward.
And it's very easy to get good results. The trickiest part about that is getting it to stick to the model.
Right.
In the first part.
Yeah.
But that again is going to be a bit of trial and error.
More yellow.
Yeah.
More
yeah.
yellow?
More yellow
make
makes
it
it
softer.
thicker.
Yeah. It'll make it stickier. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so like one of the conversions that I did for miniature exchange, I took the Wood Elf Spellweaver. He's got long hair, and he's got this crazy kind of horn thing coming up from behind him. I don't know what it was.
Is this the male spell?
The male will
one
spell.
who's like floating.
Yeah, that
And
guy.
he has these like pair of horns that look like they're coming from his back.
From
or
his
something.
shoulders or something. I don't know what it was supposed to be.
Wood Elfy.
It looked weird. So I had the metal model, and I just took my snips and I snipped those right off, and then I sculpted longer hair on him on top of the gaps where the horns were, and it was quite easy to just kind of to pull the threads of the green stuff into long hair strands.
Mm-hmm.
So hair, definitely one of the easier things to get started with. I think you can take a model that has very little hair and add hair to it. I wish I could do the same for myself.
It's just that easy, Tom.
Yeah, Tom, we should walk around with green stuff.
Sparkle party.
Yeah. But that's pretty straightforward. And I think organic stuff is actually a little easier than artificial shapes. Because it's organic, it's naturally your green stuff's going to kind of flop into a semi-organic shape by default.
Mm-hmm.
So
if
you can kind of get away with it.
If you're like extending a bit of hair and you can kind of mash the green stuff on there, then you're basically already when you go to sculpt the lines into that hair, you're just following the basic lines that are already there and kind of extending them down a bit longer. So you already have your kind of lines to follow.
Let's get Fiona out of here. We can.
Fiona.
Hi, Fiona.
She doesn't like me.
Fiona,
And she's gone.
get her out of there.
Come on. Fiona.
Gotta go. You gotta go, pup.
Don't pet her. Get her out.
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 All the dice are
All
going.
of Taylor's dice. Oh no.
Fiona, get out.
All of Taylor.
Go. Go on. She just whacks everything with her tail.
All of Taylor's dice.
All the mic stands.
Yeah, exactly. All right.
Click.
Nailed it.
So we just finished talking about hair.
But before we finish talking about hair, Ricky should talk about his wood elves.
Oh yeah, the
Fur on
yeah.
every model.
Yeah, and that'll segue nicely into hoods, because hoods are quite easy as well. A little harder, but not too difficult.
Right.
And you've done hoods. I've done hoods. You did them on your elves as well as your goblins, or your trolls. You did them on.
Yeah, the trolls actually were 3 or 4 steps though.
Yeah. Okay.
Because they were shaped so
Yeah.
droopy.
Let's. Okay. So you just finished talking about hair.
Mm-hmm.
So you can just
So I
start
can just
talking.
say,
You can
yeah.
just go straight into it. Talk about your wood elf.
Okay, so yeah, I used it to sculpt the fur on my wood elves, and my wood elves, I wanted them to have the whole winter theme, but then the wood elf models, only a few of them actually had kind of wintry looking fur. Like
Yeah, I saw on the Tale of Peter's blog you were saying there was one model in particular that has fur trims on the boots and stuff, and you wanted to kind of repeat that across the whole army.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that when I first got all the models, because I remember getting all the models at once and looking at it and going like, what am I going to do with this army now? I remember really loving that model so much and thinking that he just looked like he would fit in a nice winter theme, and I did some test painting. Didn't think it was quite enough without the fur, so I went back and was like, all right, if I'm gonna do this army, let's try it. And so it was modeling fur onto the hoods and onto the capes and capelets and onto the uppers of the boots. And it really is itself. It's a pretty easy process. Very time consuming though.
Right, if you're doing it on every model.
Yeah, doing it across the whole army, it takes a while. And because it is one of those things where I had to do it while the models were separate, all in pieces still, because you couldn't reach around behind on some things to get the tool where I could scrape the fur texture in.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually found that when I was doing the fur texture, if I did kind of an S shape as I did it, it looked more natural than just stabbing it straight in. So I started working on that. I also tried to make the fur, because the models are very dynamic, and some of them, like the fast cav, they look like they're actually riding pretty fast. So on those guys, I tried to make the fur look like it was blowing back, which is pretty easy to do if you see that the model you're working on already has some kind of dynamic flow to it. Make your hair or fur follow that, and it's going to help it look pretty cool. But it was a case of when I was doing the legs. So the legs on the Glade Guard are from the waist down with the 2 legs. I would do 1 foot one night. The next night I would do the next foot, and so I was working in just series. I would be like, all right, so tonight I'm going to get all the left feet on this one unit of Glade Guard, and then that would take me, my one modeling session, and then I'd come back the next night and do the right feet on all
Makes
the
a good
Glade
story for when somebody at work asks you what you did last night.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
left feet on old Glade Guard.
Yeah, and so and then the fur around the hoods was really just roll out a snake, one little snake of green stuff, lay it across there, then start working it into a fur shape. So pretty easy stuff to do, but
Time consuming.
But if you take the time to do it, it just changes the look of the army
Oh,
completely.
yeah.
So,
And
Yours
it creates
looks like different
something,
models.
completely unique. Yeah.
And that's really why we want to do these things in the first place, right?
You want your models to be just different in some way from everything else you see.
Yeah, for sure. So one of the things you were just talking about fur around the hoods there, but making a hood, a fairly basic hood is kind of the next. I think from a difficulty perspective, is probably the next thing up in terms of ease. It's
and a really useful technique.
Yeah, you can,
in terms of how different it can make a model look.
Very much.
I remember before the new Beastmen Shaman came out, I would see on the Beastmen forum all the time people would just get a basic gore model, add green stuff hood, and you have a pretty nice Shaman already.
Nice.
Yeah. And I know that I've taken again wood elf models and not liked the hair that has been on them, snipped the hair off, and then put a hood over the top or what have you. It's pretty straightforward. The basic technique is you're making a pancake with your green stuff so that it's nice and flat.
Do you use something to roll it out really flat with that, or you just?
I don't, because I'm always going to be smoothing it afterwards, right? So I just use my finger,
Just pinch it.
between my usually on the palm of my hand and my thumb.
That gets it thin enough.
Yeah, that usually gets it thin enough. And if it doesn't,
Spank it.
yeah, I think I've used a paint pot before. But yeah, generally that gets it thin enough, and it's surprising how thin you actually want to get it.
Sure.
And then you can just kind of cut the shape. You kind of have to think of it as if you were making a hood out of cloth. What shape would you need? Because that's like in 3 dimensions, that's likely what you're going to need to put on top of the head. And then, because you're going to want to kind of sculpt in the folds and stuff like that. But the nice thing is that the green stuff kind of lends itself to wanting to do that anyway. You lay it on like it's cloth on top of the head, and then it kind of will naturally sag and fold, and then you just kind of tucking it in with the tool, and you can get a very kind of natural, just for a hood on top. If this assumes you've got some kind of cloak underneath,
Right.
That makes it very easy when you've got clothes that you're joining it to already, and then just kind of getting a flat front so that you can still see the face. You'll notice a lot on the Games Workshop models that they've got like a kind of a straight edge on the front and down the side, and you can generally do that just with the tool, even with your finger, to get it kind of roughly right, and then the tool to get the softer edge on it.
Yeah, and to get that really sharp edge, I would almost suggest letting it cure with the ragged edge, and then just take a knife and trim it.
Yep.
After it's cured.
Oh, that's a good one.
That's actually a lot easier. You tend to find that because those really thin layers that are like you would have on a thin hood like that, super easy to cut with a sharp knife. You could just trim it carefully. Just don't cut off the nose.
Cool. And you've on your stone trolls that you did for your Night Goblin army, you've kind of taken the hood thing one step further.
Yeah, those were actually 3-step hoods because I had to have the Night Goblin hoods kind of act as like a shoulder drape thing too that goes down the back some. So I had to do that part first, and they have all these interesting chains and stuff around their necks too that I wanted to keep showing.
And they're not wearing any clothes.
Yeah,
right?
normally.
So you don't have anything to sculpt onto.
Yeah, so I did like those I guess kind of collars is kind of what it would be, like a collar that goes down the back and down the front. That was the first step. The next step was to do kind of what would be a bib or chin strap that went kind of in front of the ears, behind the ears, but then draped down to give you that sagging effect that you would get on a really baggy hood. And then the last step, for the third day in the series, was to add the pointy part. And when I did that pointy part, I had it kind of. Actually, I think I had to do that in 2 days too, because I had to build a structure underneath. So there was like 2 days to do each of the peaks. But then the last layer was what I used to blend the chin strappy part into the other part. So it was another one of those things where I wanted there to be a huge gap hanging down, like these hoods to look like they're really cavernous hoods. And in order to have that, you have to get that green stuff strap in there and then just step away, because if you try and touch the model in any other way, you're going to mess it up. So yeah, just another one of those patience things. And then I also use the green stuff to do simple weapon swaps where I was just cutting off their weapons and turning them into stalagmites again. But
yep. And actually that's one thing that I do with leftover green stuff is I'll turn it into rocks. So this is you finished with your sculpting. It's going to harden up, and you're not going to be able to do anything with it. Just turn it into a rock, and you can. That's real easy to do. It's just it doesn't matter. Take a shape, bash some edges on it, just give it a nice flat bottom, and then you can use it on even on the 20 mil bases, just to add a little bit of interesting detail. Or what I've most frequently used it for is when there's been something that particularly in fine cast where like with the treekin or something like that, where one leg has been slightly raised and not flat enough to come down and meet the surface of the base. Oh, I'll put a rock underneath
Put a
it.
little rock in there. What I've been using those leftover bits for since I've been working on the Chaos Dwarfs is just rolling them into as perfect little round balls as I can, and then wait for them to cure, and then chop it in half, and you have little bubbles.
Those are the bubbles of your
Those are the
lava.
bubbles in my on my lava bases.
Nice. I love it.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say they were going to be like grape shot or something to go beside your cannon.
No, I've been using them for the little bubbles.
That's cool. Though.
Yeah.
Good use.
Okay, so those are some of the basic things to
Can I talk
sculpt.
about another really simple technique that's useful for a couple of things? Is that instead of using these main green stuff tools we've been talking about, you can use tweezers to kind of work green stuff into some shapes. Like if you take some very fine tweezers and just pinch a bit of green stuff and pull, you get a little like triangle shape, which is perfect for two things. One of which is a lot of models, especially GW models that have fur. The fur is actually like a series of tiny little triangles.
Yeah.
So something I did was I had the Thunderwolf models for 40k that I wanted to use in my Beastmen army, but they have a bunch of like cyborg parts over them, kind of in amongst the fur.
Yeah.
So I'd kind of cover those up and then pinch it with the tweezers into the little triangles that look exactly like the rest of the fur
Nice.
on those models, really.
That's nice.
I've
and
never
then
tried
another-
that. That'd be cool.
Yeah, it works pretty well. And then another thing those little triangles look good for is flames, which is again something I've been doing on the Chaos Dwarfs.
Yeah.
And again, a simple technique, just kind of mash a bit of green stuff onto the area you want to cover in flames, and then work at the bottom, start just pinching up series of these little triangles, and it looks like flames rising up across whatever surface you're doing. So, and that's a really simple technique. It's just pulling with the tweezers.
It's basically you fur follows gravity, flames ignores
Exactly.
it.
Yeah, exactly.
Same technique, just go up.
Pull fur down, flames up.
Yeah. Okay. So we talked a bit about some of these basic techniques. One thing I want to talk about before we finish up, I think we should definitely do another section about green stuff and go into a bit more detail about sculpting and that sort of thing. But before we do that, and we'll do that in another podcast, let's just talk about some of the potential alternatives to green stuff. You mentioned earlier, Ricky, about other 2-part epoxies, but those are pretty much the same thing, just different brand, different color, but they work in very much the same fashion.
Yes and no. So like milliput is a completely different texture. You'll find that green stuff is I guess the molecular bond on green stuff is really strong with itself. So it's not easy to really just kind of, when it's still green, you still have to stretch it. It stretches before it snaps apart. Things like milliput. Milliput doesn't do that. It acts more like clay, really sticky clay sometimes. And so I find that I don't like the milliput, but it's a good alternative. It's actually cheaper than green stuff. After it dries, it tools better than green stuff, meaning you can drill it and sand it better than green stuff. Green stuff doesn't sand very well at all, but milliput sands really well.
Yeah, I've also seen milliput used for doing like rough shapes and bulk, because it's a fair bit cheaper, and you can get it in most art stores.
Yeah,
not just hobby stores.
Yeah.
You like if you're doing a large model, or maybe some scenery or whatever, something that's a decent size, you can rough sculpt it in milliput very quickly.
Yeah, and it comes in different colors too. If that if you're gonna just prime and paint it, that doesn't really matter. But then there's also different grains to it. So they actually have a fine grain that lets you do really smooth type stuff and really detailed stuff too. Then there's the Aves epoxy sculpt. I actually think that that's kind of the thing that a lot of the pro sculptors have moved over to.
So what's it called again?
Aves epoxy sculpt.
Epoxy? Okay.
Yeah, and I'll give you the link. I'm probably pronouncing it wrong.
Yeah, no worries. We'll put that in the notes.
But it's they have a series of different sculpting stuff, and they actually have some that's you can buy in big tubs, so it's even cheaper than milliput. And then they have stuff that's more fine grain that you would use for doing the masters, the miniature masters. And then moving away from the 2-part stuff, you get into probably my favorite alternative which is just Sculpey. Good old cheap Sculpey.
Yeah, I made a couple of beasts of Nurgle for Taylor in about 2 hours out of Sculpey. Sculpey is
It's chaos.
Sculpey is even easier to make stuff out of than Play-Doh. I mean,
it is.
It's easier to work with than Play-Doh. It's less sticky. And then, but the downside is, of course, you got to bake it in the oven,
Right.
Which is also its upside. It's because you can bake it in the oven and have that piece done in half an hour, and then work on it again that same night. Instead of something in green stuff, you have to wait. So, and then it's super economical. When I started the Night Goblin project, Night Goblins 2.0, and I wanted the stalagmites on every base. The first unit I did was with green stuff. I was like, oh man, this is just going to kill me. I can't, it took a whole packet of green stuff to do that. I was like, that's just not economical. And then I tried milliput, and I was like, it's a little more economical, but I just hate working with it so much that I just couldn't do it. And I was like, I'm going back to Sculpey, because I could buy a huge box of Sculpey for the same price as either of those other things. I'm still using that same box of Sculpey to do all kinds of terrain for sparkle parties, all of that whole army's stalagmites, some display board stuff, like everything from this one box of Sculpey that's probably $10. And it works super easily, uses the same tools, bake it, pull it out, use it right away.
Yeah, I love Sculpey.
Yeah.
I mean, and you can do really fine detail with Sculpey.
Very fine. And it tools well after it's been baked too, kind of like the milliput does. So if you want to sand it, you can sand it. You can carve it after it's been baked. Pretty cool stuff.
Yep.
So what are the limitations? Can you make a miniature out of it?
You can, and some people do. The problem is it's not as strong on the fine scale. So if you're trying to build anything really fine, like an arm sticking up or something, would probably just snap off with very little pressure. You can do armatures for it, which would help quite a bit, but and then you're probably not going to get quite the level of detail out of it, because you can get different firmnesses for it, but it can be pretty soft, which makes it hard to get good detail in. Yeah,
but again, to do a rough outline and then bake it, and then you can work green stuff on it
right on top of that
very quickly. Yep. It's not a bad way to go.
Yeah, and really anything you need to do in mass, use Sculpey if you can.
Yeah.
The Art of War.
Okay, so for the Art of War in this episode, we are going to be talking about fast cavalry. So, fast cavalry, I think the whole idea behind the rules for fast cavalry very much influenced by the Mongols, right? If you read about Genghis Khan and the crazy
archers,
exactly, and the faint flight and all that sort of stuff, very much straight from history there. So, fast cavalry, most armies have access to this, not all, but most. Let's just go through what the actual rules are for fast cavalry before we start to talk about them, or how to use them. So they get the Vanguard special rule, which means after normal deployment and after scouts, you get to make a move of up to 12 inches.
And not end within 12 inches of someone else.
Yep. They get a free reform. In fact, they get as many free reforms as they want.
Yeah.
Even if they march, as long as they don't move double their movement value, which is awesome. That's just like skirmishers.
Probably their main advantage over regular cavalry.
Yep.
It's just insane maneuverability.
Yes, for sure. If you have a character in the unit, it must also have the fast cavalry rule. Otherwise, the whole unit loses fast cav, which is kind of a pain in the ass that you have to keep your eye out for. if you're
Sure.
building an army list.
But it makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're minimized by the slowest moving
slowest
thing
person.
in your
And
your
that's
unit.
a rule across the whole
Right.
of the game. And then, as I was just talking about, feigned flight is if you flee from as a charge reaction, and then you rally at the start of your next turn. Not only do you reform as normal, but then you're also free to move and shoot as normal during the remaining moves part of the movement phase.
Mm-hmm.
So effectively, there is no penalty to you for fleeing and rallying.
Correct.
So do they also get to march?
I think you cannot march, or can you? Does it just say move as normal?
It says is also free to move during the remaining moves part of the movement phase.
Yes, you could march.
You
can
can march.
march.
Yeah, you can march.
And the unit is also free to shoot as normal, but always counts as having moved.
Mm-hmm.
So
Which fast cav is always going to be moving anyway, so it
Yep.
doesn't matter.
Yep. So fire on the march. Fast cav can shoot during a turn in which they marched or reformed, as long as their weapon doesn't have move or fire.
So like skirmishes again.
Again, like skirmishers, you can march, and with fast cav, typically it's move somewhere between move 7 and 10. So
It
that's
gives you an insane threat range.
that's a march of somewhere between 14 and 20 inches plus whatever range your weapon happens.
So you
to
can
have.
always get in. You know, you're going to take a penalty for having moved, but you can lose the penalty for long range by getting yourself into
close,
position for
yep.
that. So it's kind of a wash.
Yep. Okay, so that is all the rules for fast cavalry. So let's talk about Vanguard first, because I think it's an interesting one. I don't think, in general, fast cavalry is the only way to get Vanguard, with the exception of, I think, some magic items. I don't think there's any other units that get it as a special rule.
Standard.
Any other unit type that gets it? No.
There's certainly no unit type that gets it, but I mean, I can't think of any unit like in the game. Dwarves, we talked about they have some
Sure,
exceptions.
they have some stuff.
Like the gyrocopters, for example, which are kind of their equivalent to fast cav.
Right. Yeah. Otherwise, it's pretty much your only Vanguard option.
Yep. Okay, so let's talk a bit about vanguarding.
Mm-hmm.
How do you use it, Tom? So in your Chaos Dwarf army.
Yeah, so my fast cav experience is pretty limited. I have in my Chaos Dwarf army a little unit of Hobgoblin Wolf Riders, and then normally one or two just lone characters on their wolves who also get fast cav as well. And honestly, my Vanguard I use pretty conservatively, and the reason is I found for my playstyle with the Chaos Dwarfs, I need chaff in the late game. For kind of redirects as people are closing in on my guns and stuff. So for me, one of the worst things I can do is to get really aggressive with that fast cav and have it shot off the board at the very beginning of the game.
Yep.
So what I generally do is I'll always drop that fast cav as my first deployment dropped, you know, to help see how the deployment's going to go. And then I'll use Vanguard just to help redeploy that unit within my own deployment zone to get it in the right position for the game. And I think that is a pretty useful use for Vanguard.
Mm-hmm.
Once
Absolutely.
you spread yourself thin during deployment, before you decide where the main bulk of your army's going, then it gives you a chance to consolidate.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, there's a whole tactic around that with the refused flank deployment, where you can deploy your fast-moving units, and particularly those, particularly fast cav, because they can vanguard and they've got such a big movement range, where you deploy those all on one flank. You deploy your slower-moving stuff on the other flank,
Right.
and then you use your vanguard moves to just move all of the units onto the flank where your slow-moving units
Sure.
are. And you've effectively refused one flank for combat.
Exactly. It's exactly the tactic of waiting for as long as possible before your opponent knows where your main fighting force is going to be.
Yep.
So just dropping fast cav in places that you're not even intending to have your main army.
Yeah, and the advantage there is, you get an extra turn of not having to engage the army on your opponent's army on their
Sure.
turns. Right? You've got that. It can often take them a long time to redeploy and get over to where the mainstay of your army is.
Mm-hmm.
So
there's, of course, a lot more aggressive way to use the Vanguard, which I guess is becoming most common amongst the Elfie armies now.
Yep, and I've also seen it with Lizardman armies where they take the Ripperdactyls. And so, yeah, the more aggressive Vanguard is where, particularly on the flanks, you're taking that full 12-inch move, moving up as wide as you can, and angling your unit so that it has a huge field of view over the entire battlefield. And then, the downside of Vanguard is you can't charge if you Vanguarded. If you get the first turn, you can't charge. So if your opponent gets the first turn, then you can charge on your subsequent turn.
And if your opponent gets the first turn, then they have to use their movement phase effectively, responding to what you've done in the Vanguard. You've had this whole free round of movement that your opponent now has to spend their precious turn responding to make sure they're not getting flank charged.
Yeah.
Next time around. And also there's some really nice shooty fast cav in the game, particularly for the high elf and dark elf armies now. They both have core fast cav units that can, pack a little bit of shooting, and it's nice to get those up the field into range to start picking off enemy chaff.
Yep, pick off enemy chaff, pick off
lone characters and stuff.
Take pot shots at those sorts of things, and then even potentially charge in against war machines.
Sure.
Right.
Because that Vanguard alone can often get you within range or even short range for your weapon. So then if you don't need to move again, you can get shots off with no penalty at all.
Yeah, for sure. So the downside about taking that Vanguard is, of course, that you're then outside of usually the leadership bubble from your general. And typically these fast cav units are the base leadership for whatever your army type is. There are exceptions, right? I know in the Wood Elf army, we have a couple of fast cav units that are, 1 point leadership higher, that's special leadership. So that's typically, the idea is that they're lighter armored. They are something that's going to not survive any serious attempt to take them out.
Sure.
But, typically will go up and harass and then run away. Right. So if you think about them in your head as this is what they're for,
right.
They are for putting pressure and then running away when someone tries to actually get into them, then you're thinking about them in the right way.
Right. And
there's a lot of stuff you can do with them to apply pressure before you have to run away.
Yeah. Especially for, if you're the one who really needs to engage your opponent, they have a shooting advantage over you, let's say, then applying like a kind of target saturation approach where you have the vanguarded fast cav already kind of up in your opponent's face, and you're making them choose if they want to target some of their shooting against that unit while your actual stronger combat units are coming forward. So it's helping take some of the pressure off your other units because there's a very imminent threat sat there right up in your opponent's face already. Yeah, for sure.
So let's talk a little bit about the fast cav options that we're aware of in the different armies. So we can eliminate dwarfs right away because they don't have any cavalry whatsoever. But all three elf armies can take fast cav. Yeah. And they all, in fact, have, I think, multiple different types of fast cav.
I think the high elves only have...
They only have the Illyrian Reavers.
The Reavers.
I think you're right, yeah. So they have the Reavers. Dark elves have...
The dark elves and the wood elves now. Well, the wood elves have 3 now, right?
Wood elves have 4.
4,
well,
including the...
So wood elves have the Warhawk Riders, who are flying fast cav. Monstrous flying fast cav. They have the Wild Riders and the Sisters of the Thorn. And then they have the Glade Riders, who have ambush, which is different. Right. But they are still fast cav. Dark elves have the Doomfire Warlocks and the Dark Riders.
Right.
And then in the Orcs and Goblins, they've got Wolf Riders.
Wolf Riders.
And Spider Riders.
And
Spider
spiders.
Riders, yep.
Mm.
2 different types. Then in, let's see, what's next? Warriors of Chaos have
Marauder Horsemen.
Marauder Horsemen.
Who
And
can take...
and the ones that ride the Seekers. What are those?
Oh, yeah, the Slanesh Hellstriders of
Yeah,
Slanesh,
they
are they
have
called?
those.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think those are fast cav as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Mhm.
Uh,
And the Marauders can take... They're, I guess, one of the only warriors units that can take some missile weapon. They can take the javelins, which is kind of nice for harassing.
Is it javelins or throwing axes?
They can take either.
Either?
Actually, I think,
Okay.
yeah. Mhm.
And then the demons can get fast cav from the demonettes
Yeah.
on the steeds. I
Yeah.
forget what they're called. The down.
Hells, Seekers again.
Seekers.
Yeah. Yep. What else have we got? Chaos Dwarves. You guys have access
Yeah,
to the
we've got
Hobgoblins.
Hobgoblin Wolf Riders.
Lizardmen have the Flyers.
Yeah, Lizardmen have
Pterodons and
pterodons and
Ripidactyls.
ripidactyls. Yep.
Empire have their Pistoliers
Yep.
Pistoliers.
and Outriders.
Outriders. Yeah.
Yeah.
Bretonians have possibly some of the best fast cav
Yeah.
The
in
Peg Knights.
the Pegasus Knights and the mounted yeomen.
Mm.
So mounted yeomen are very cheap, and the Pegasus Knights are incredibly well
Right.
armored.
Yeah.
So let's see, who else have we not covered?
Well, let's see. Skaven have none.
Skaven have
They
none.
do have wolf rats, which are monstrous arcanum, but those are fast cap but scroll binding.
Okay, interesting.
So
Yeah. So and then the undead armies.
undead do not. No.
No.
Don't think
Well,
so.
don't Tomb Kings do, don't they? Or are they not fast cav?
I don't know.
I'm not sure.
I don't think they are.
Yeah, I don't think anything in the Tomb King army is fast. Isn't
Good.
Isn't that the whole point? Is that they're really slow?
Yeah.
Yeah, poor
and
Tomb
Kind of
Kings.
plod towards you.
For all you Tomb King players out there, we're sorry.
Yep.
Anyway, when the first time that I saw fast cav becoming like a mainstay of army lists for a particular race was when the new High Elf book came out, and they got their Illyrian Reavers moved to core, and all of a sudden cheap, and all of a sudden every list is having 3 units of Illyrian Reavers.
Yeah, just fill your core with it.
Yeah, because they fill the role that Eagles used to fill for that army. Not necessarily as well, and you do see some Eagles still being taken, but they form a viable chaff kind of redirector, plus the other roles that we've already mentioned for fast cav, vanguarding and applying a little shooting pressure early on.
Absolutely.
So that's when like fast cav seemed to become just like a mainstay of a particular race.
Yep.
And then that was followed up by Dark Elves, who obviously took the fast cav to a whole new level.
Yep.
The Dark Riders kind of outshining the Reavers in every respect, I think.
Yeah, pretty much.
And then the Brolocks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we'll get onto them later when we talk about building whole lists. I guess you don't have to build a whole list around them.
No, but you know what? That's actually probably not a bad place for us to go now.
Into really the fast
cav build, yeah. So
this is where they move on from becoming supporting units, supporting your main combat blocks, to becoming the meat of your army.
Yeah. And really, I mean, high elves can't really do it.
No, unless you're going to do something crazy like dump a load of characters into a Reavers unit. But
yeah, and even though with the high elves, you can't do that because the Elven Steed in the High Elf book does not have the fast cav rule.
Really?
Yeah, and it's fairly certain that it's an oversight because the Dark Steed and the Elven Steed in the Wood Elf book have it.
Well, it makes sense. It makes sense that when you bard the steed, then it
Yes.
wouldn't be fast cav anymore. But even just an unbarded one in the High Elf book.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Constant source of complaint for those Asur players. Yeah. So really, we're talking about we've seen the lists come out for the Dark Elves.
Yeah, the Dark Elves fast cav spam lists have been coming thick and fast and been doing really well from what I've read.
Yep.
As well.
And obviously, I'm thinking about Wood Elves.
Wood Elves are blown it open to a whole new level, I think.
Yep. And then I don't know
is
that there's
fun.
any other armies that can really take a full list of them
Right.
because of they don't have it in core. Maybe
Goblins.
goblins can.
Yeah.
The wolf riders are core.
Yeah, they're core.
it would be
Both the Wolf Riders and
terrible.
Spider Riders are core. Yeah, it used to be pretty viable to do MSU with them because it used to be if you had under a certain number of goblins in the unit, then you didn't suffer from animosity.
Oh yeah, but
But-
there's still going to be
but-
chain panic throughout the army, right?
Well,
With that many
yeah,
small units of goblins
yeah, but
running around.
so yeah, I mean, you end up the problem with cavalry of all fast cav is either on a 25 by 100 or on the big 40s. They take up a big footprint, and if you have that many of them across the table, yeah, it's hard to get them all in your bubble. But I did see people do it in the last edition, and it was pretty fun to see. I used to use Wolf Riders when I did my Night Golems the first time. I used them quite a bit. My cheeky move with the fast cav was to create an uninterrupted chain between the unit I wanted to hit with my fanatics and the unit that that I had the fanatics in, and I would move my fanatics into 8 inches, kill the Wolf Riders. Who cares? It's just Wolf Riders. They're cheaper than the fanatic usually, but the fanatic would definitely hit, and that unit that I really needed it to hit got hit, and I could. So
solid.
pretty nasty trick. I usually end up killing a unit, but who cares, right? So,
That's fantastic.
Interesting.
but yeah, you can do it with orcs and goblins because it's in the core.
They're like a little fanatic pea shooter.
Yep.
Yeah, that's really what it was. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, one of the primary tactics that you see with the fast cav is the double flee. You can do this with any unit that can flee, and you generally want it to be a cheap unit. The reason the fast cav are so good at it is because of the feigned flight we just talked about.
So why do you describe the double flee?
Yep, I will do. So, enemy unit declares a charge on fast cav unit A. Fast cav unit A takes a flee reaction, and because they're swift stride, they flee reasonably far. So
Preferably through one of your own units.
yeah, usually through fast cav unit B. Fast cav unit B is then a prime target for the enemy unit. So the enemy says, "Okay, I'm gonna redirect
charge.
into fast cav unit B," and then you say, "Oh, well, I'm gonna flee again," and you flee through your first unit. Flee through fast cav unit A, and now that's a fail charge. So there's no, you're only allowed to redirect once. There's no way for the enemy unit to reach fast cav unit B because it's the other side of fast cav A, and fast cav A is no longer a legal target for the charge. So that's how the double flee works. This is a very effective way to deal with the Death Star. You can basically just keep double fleeing and move all of your other stuff out of the way.
And the point is to also do it at an angle, just not directly right in front. That way they're constantly moving
The direction you want them to go
direction you
towards
want
the
them-
edge of the board,
while the rest of your army can position to hit them in the rear or something.
or take out everything,
or just
else,
ignore them completely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's definitely a key use you see for multiple units of fast cav, and that's part of the reason why these fast cav army lists work so well is because they're just really hard to catch.
Right.
Yeah.
So of these two armies that we've identified that are really going to use fast cav spam effectively, Dark Elves and now the new Wood Elves, what does kind of an army list with one of those armies look like? So Dark Elves, you're going to imagine the core being filled pretty much entirely with
Dark Riders.
Dark Riders.
Yep.
And
So for people that don't know about Dark Riders, they're on an Elven steed which has move 9. They come with light armor by default, I believe.
yeah, and you can buy them a shield.
And you can buy them a shield. I think they're in and around the 20-point mark
Yeah,
per model. We've got the book. We'll look it up in just a moment.
Yeah, and you can get them the repeated crossbow as well,
Yeah.
which is pretty much auto take.
Yeah, and that's like a 24-inch range.
Yeah, it's the
and
full
can
repeated
multi-shot.
crossbow now, not the handbow
Yep.
that Dark Riders used to have.
So that gives them an enormous,
Huge threat range,
42-inch threat range, and 54-inch if you count the Vanguard move, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's pretty much anywhere on the board you can deploy them, and they're going to be able to threaten anywhere on the board.
And in every movement phase, they're going to be able to move in such a way that they'll be out of any charge threat, and then unleash their volley of shots.
Yep.
And the opponent can keep repositioning to try and get a good charge on them every turn, but every movement phase they're going to be out of that charge arc again, unleashing another volley.
Yep. Yep. So that's the core. Mm-hmm. Now special, they don't have fast.
They have no fast cav in special.
Yep.
So you're gonna, and then in rare they have the warlocks. Of course.
Have the warlocks.
So you're gonna take your maximum 2 units of those warlocks.
Yep.
One probably keep it about 5 for a kind of just fast kind of
fast moving doombolt firing unit.
Doombolting unit, and then the other one you see people using as... So what we haven't talked about yet in this fast cav list, you obviously have a lot of stuff moving around, shooting a lot, staying out of danger, but you need something to score yourself the points at the end of the day. You have to have something that after you soften everything up with your doom bolts and your zappy crossbows and everything.
Yep.
You got to have something that can charge in there and actually get you the points at the end of the day, and that's going to be this second unit of warlocks.
Yep.
Maybe around 10 models plus a whole crap ton of characters. This seems to be the Dark Elf way. The Dark Elf of making fast cav work.
They can take hero and lower level fighty characters and give them 1-up armor saves and decent ward saves.
Right.
And so
on a fast cav.
On a fast cav, because they can get the Sea Dragon cloak for 5-up scaly skin and combine it with
being mounted, a shield, and heavy armor.
Or even you can take away the shield and put dragon helm or something on, so then you can have a great weapon as well.
Armors, yeah.
So a bunch of great weapon 1-up fast cav characters
on initiative 7, because they've got ASF. So it's nasty stuff.
So the reason the Dark Elves kind of need that is that the warlocks themselves are not the fightiest of units. They make a great place to keep characters because of their ward save, which helps when they're getting picked off by lookout sirs.
Yep.
So it makes a reasonably durable kind of lookout sir bus to keep your characters in, but the characters are going to be what has to score the points for you in the combat. Yeah,
for sure. And so I think typically what you would see, certainly if you wanted an all fast cav list, you're taking much more than your core allowance.
Right.
With the Dark
You're probably
Riders.
not going to see, it's probably not going to be all fast cav.
No.
You're going to see 3 or 4 units of Dark Riders,
a couple
2
bolt
warlocks, and then a bunch of bolt throwers.
Bolt throwers,
Because softening is very important, and taking out other highly maneuverable flying things like frost phoenixes and stuff that's going to really mess with your plan.
But the key point is you're not going to see big blocks of infantry.
No big blocks of infantry, because it's just giving your opponent something easy to focus on.
Yep. And you've also see highly mobile wizards, either in that block of fast cav,
right,
or on like a Dark Pegasus with. There's a special Dark Elf magic item that gives a really good ward save against shooting and magic missiles.
Yeah, the cloak.
Yeah, so...
Cloak of Twilight, I believe.
Yep.
Or the wizard can just be kind of, on their dark steed and just popping between units of Dark Riders wherever they need to be to stay out of danger.
Yeah. So that's the kind of the Dark Elf build. The tactic is avoid, shoot with crossbows.
Avoid, soften...
magic it up.
That bus with the characters in is going to be picking on stuff early in the game that it can kill in one turn.
Yeah.
Things like monsters and whatever that can charge in. All those great weapon characters, hack it up.
Yeah.
But it's gonna be prowling around looking for soft targets, staying out of reach of the big units until turn 5 or 6, really.
Yeah.
After those things have been softened.
Yep, for sure. So it's interesting. I think the Wood Elf lists are different.
The Wood Elf approach is going to be entirely different, and I really like that. That
they're not the same army.
They've made these 2 armies very viable fast cap, but the Wood Elf build is going to be completely different. So why don't you talk about what tools the Wood Elves have?
So Wood Elves have they do have fast cav and core in the Glade Riders. Mm-hmm. But these guys are ambushers also.
Right.
Which means that you're not even deploying on the first turn of the game. You're coming on from a board edge from turn 2 onwards.
Possibly,
yes, on a 3-up.
Possibly not.
Or possibly not, yeah. So that's core. I think you'll probably see a couple units of those. In like a fast cav build, you're definitely going to see a couple of units. But I think you'll also see the good old fashioned Glade Guard. Because of the different magic arrows that they can take, they're going to play a very good supporting role. A little bit like the repeater bolt throwers.
Yeah, they replace the bolt throwers.
Yeah. They play that role differently, but that's the role that they're playing. Where the fast cav really shines in the Wood Elf army is totally opposite. It's in the special section.
Yes.
All right. So there's actually 3 fast cav in there. You have the Wild Riders, who are they're almost medium cavalry. Is probably the best way to think about them. They hit like a ton of bricks.
Whew, I experienced this already.
They are frenzied with devastating charge, strength 4 base. Even the mount has strength 4. So a unit of 6 of them is pumping out 30 attacks on the charge, which is it's pretty insane. Actually, I don't think there's any non-monstrous unit that can pump out that many attacks.
Yeah.
So they are very much your punchy fast cav unit.
So that it differs so much from the Dark Elves in that you're getting your combat output from a unit.
Yes, from rank and file troops.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Characters are going to play a way smaller role, at least combat-wise, in the Wood Elf.
I think so. So then your second choice is the Sisters of the Thorn. So they have a mechanic similar to the Warlocks in that they cast spells, but theirs are much more supportive and defensive than they are offensive like the Dark Elves. And so these guys are going to be, or gals, are going to be ladies, are going to be primarily the character bunker.
Yeah.
Right. Put your wizard in there, keep her safe, and just hop around, stay in the forest.
Interesting as well. Different from the Dark Elves, they have a ranged weapon. They have these poison javelins they can throw. How useful do you think that is to them?
I think that's good for taking out those little chaffy units that like the Great Eagle, where one of the tactics with the Great Eagle is to charge into a mage bunker and just charge right into the mage and direct all your attacks on that wizard.
So stand and shoot with those.
You can stand and shoot with them, and with the poison, you're going to take a lot of those things out.
Yeah.
And they're ballistic skill 5.
So you're going to hit on 3s still on a stand and shoot.
Well, probably 4s because you'll be at long range. Yeah. But
if it's a thrown weapon, do you take range penalties for thrones?
You
do. It's just no move penalties.
Just no move penalties. Yeah.
Sorry.
So it's. I think they're a reasonable bunker.
I think they're a great unit. They just they serve a very different purpose than the Dark Riders.
Yeah, you are
because you don't want them in combat. You want a different looking army.
Yeah, for sure. And really, what I see these guys doing is kind of scuttling around in the back half of the battlefield.
Always making sure to leave the corner just in a forest. So,
so that the wizard gets that +1 to cast. Yeah, for sure. And then the third fast cav unit you have, for me, flavor-wise, is probably one of my favorites, is the Warhawk Riders.
Pretty iconic unit for the Wood Elves.
Yeah, these are effectively guys on slightly smaller, faster, more aggressive eagles, the Warhawks. And, being flying cavalry means you also... your move range is 10, so your march is 20 inches. They've got longbows, so that gives them a 50-inch effective range. These guys, I think, are kind of combination of harassment and shock troop. They're good for a combo charge.
Sure.
With the Wild Riders. One of the downsides of the Wild Riders is that they are frenzied. So I can see the Warhawk Riders kind of sitting in front of the Wild Riders and then charging something either behind or off at a distance and allowing
or the same thing as
the same thing as the Wild Riders.
Are going to charge,
but allowing you to choose the charge rather than not.
Sure.
I think you could quite easily spend 50% of your points.
It's easy to see core sections being nothing but fast cav in Wood Elves.
Special?
Special,
yeah,
I mean. Yeah.
Special, nothing but fast cav.
Yeah.
And then you'd probably have missile support from both Glade Guard and the Way Watchers.
But the Wood Elves differ so much from the Dark Elves in that you're spreading your combat threat out among a lot of different units. And the nice thing about that is that whereas with the Dark Elf build, you have that one combat bus that you have to use relatively conservatively in the early game. In the early game, because you don't want it like logged up against a load of
dwellers below
infantry. The Wood Elves, you can start using your fast cav pretty early in the game. Like even sending them into a combat that they're probably not gonna win in the long term, just to wipe out with a unit of Wild Riders, to wipe out half of a unit.
Yeah, absolutely.
In the early game,
and because I mean it's actually kind of the MSU strategy, but you're not afraid to throw away any unit.
Sure, you can take a much more tiered approach in terms of expendability.
Yep.
You have kind of your Glade Riders who are completely expendable, your Wild Riders who are expendable as long as they, do significant damage to a unit, and then your sister bus who is pretty much the only non-expendable unit.
Well, and even so, if they give up their points, it's not the end of the world because it's not a huge point sink. All they're doing is protecting the wizard. The wizard can always hop somewhere else,
right?
And she's worth twice as many points as the unit, so she's the one you're trying to protect.
Right.
She could hop out and hide in a wood somewhere.
Hide in the woods or go into another unit, right? There's plenty of fast cav to help back her up.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's kind of a couple of the main builds you're going to see if you see an all fast cav army.
Yeah, it's likely going to be one of those.
Are Marauders in the Warriors of Chaos? Are those still core?
Yeah, they're core.
But the warrior infantry is so dang good.
And the chariots, warrior chariots.
People just use the Marauders.
I would honestly probably use some Marauders on a horse.
Byron certainly uses a couple of units for that fast cav
redirection.
They're
definitely not something that I would try and build my army around, though.
Yeah, but it is something. Well, I know that in the last book they used to do. You used to see them every now and then as all Marauder horseman armies every now and then, but this one I guess we won't see it.
The new
much,
Warriors
but they
book.
still could do it.
They could, and there is no doubt that there are other builds where people would put together a primarily fast cav army. We're talking about the ones where
it's effective.
But that's probably one of your best choices.
Or it's either one of your best, or it's consistently good enough that you're going to see it at competitive play.
Rather than kind of for a fluffy reason.
Yeah.
That somebody might put it together.
So let's talk a little bit about how do you deal with fast cav, right? Because it's tricky, right? They're so maneuverable.
Yeah.
Let's take, you've got an 18-inch move or a 16-inch move. You can reform as much as you want. So you're going in any direction and then pointing in any direction when you're done.
Right.
Fanatics.
Yeah. So that is a pretty good way, right?
Yeah.
Stuff that forces movement phases to stop.
Yeah.
There aren't too many things like that. I mean, Fanatics is definitely one thing.
Yeah, just try and get on my flank. I don't care.
Yeah, and in fact, for the dwarves, the Oath Stone is another way to help deal with that.
Yeah.
It's like you can charge me on the flank; it's not going to do any different.
Yeah.
The other thing is magic is obviously a key way to try and deal with these
magic
guys.
missiles are going to be excellent against the lightly armored stuff.
Well, and the main reason is you a lot of the time you don't need to have they don't need to be in your forward arc, right? Which type
magic
of
missiles
spell?
You need forward arc and line of sight.
And what is it? Is it direct damage? You don't
direct
need forward
damage.
Arc?
You don't need line of sight, but you still need forward.
Still
arc.
need forward arc. Okay.
But I mean, with magic, you can obviously move to face things and not take any penalty for it.
Yep.
The way you would with actual shooting. So.
Yep. So you can get your wizard pointing at the thing you want to destroy. A lot of the signature spells have some way to deal with fast cav, right? So your fireball, Searing Doom not so much because they tend to be lightly armored.
Right.
Your Doom Bolt,
Right.
and
magic missiles often seem, with the power spells out there, magic missiles can seem kind of not too scary, and they're one of the things that people will often let through.
Ruby Ring of Ruin.
So
It's
exactly,
good, yeah.
I think
everyone can take that.
I think
pretty
including
much.
a ruby ring and a low-level wizard with a magic missile is nice for a bit of redundancy.
Yeah.
Make sure you always have something being pushed through. I think it's honestly going to be a really hard thing for big horde infantry armies to deal with, though.
Yeah,
because
you can't move fast enough.
Yeah, and you can try and keep your units covering each other's bases to keep a battle line that presents as few flanks as possible.
Mm-hmm.
But as soon as units start to break out of that formation at all, they can just take stuff in every facing, essentially. And this is what I really struggled with against the new Wood Elves with my Beastmen, is that I was trying to huddle up in my leadership bubble, trying to also turn to face
Wild Rider threats.
The threats that were coming in, but also make sure I was turned the right way to cast spells at what I wanted to cast at. And at some point you have to make a decision, like, I'm going to have to take a charge off that unit or that unit. I have to choose which one I'm going to get in the front and which one in the flank.
Yeah.
And it turns out against the Wood Elves I ended up underestimating the Wild Riders and allowed them into a flank, and that was just terrible news.
Well, I think war machines like organ guns and the Hellblaster volley guns, things like that, are going to be really good too for some.
Yep.
If your
even
army
a
has
cannon
something-
with grape shot,
yeah,
can be pretty good.
because those can turn and face in any direction, no matter where the fast cav try and move.
I think this,
as long as they have the range to do it, that's gonna.
This threat about exposing facings to multi-charges is unfortunately going to kind of leave some armies with no option but to castle a little bit, so that there's no faces being exposed. And as long as you have a reasonable shooting output to kind of countershoot the stuff that's coming at you, then that is probably going to end up being a reasonable tactic.
Yeah, and if you're playing a fast cav army, then you have to think about how do you deal with that.
How do you break into a castle?
There are a few ways. Flyers can help. Because sometimes there'll be a gap in the castle that you couldn't charge to on the ground, but that you can charge
especially
to.
with armies that will keep the war machines behind the main infantry lines. You can often just bypass over the top.
Yep.
That's what I would always do with my Beastmen against castles. The Harpies can always make a charge against a cannon that's behind an infantry unit, because they have to leave at least 1 inch of room, and a Harpy's base is less than an inch big, so you have to always be able to charge Harpies in there.
Yep. And that's a little tougher with fast cav, right?
Yeah, sure.
Because usually the flyers are on 40 mil bases.
Yeah, exactly.
The other option is ambushers, who can come on in the back line. Of course, your castle could be so close to the back line that's difficult to do. But really, how I would probably approach it is to focus on one edge of the castle.
Yeah, I think that's what you have to do, and then try and sweep in through one side.
So position everything ready for a combo charge. Get all of your supporting missile fire onto that unit. Weaken it sufficiently. You want to have the next one online weakened as well, so that if you break the first one on the first round of combat, you're overrunning into something that's already weakened rather than something that's at full strength. Mm-hmm. And if you can set that up, you're in good shape.
Something I think that fast cav lists are going to also find helpful, facing armies that are trying to counter them in this way, is to have some unit of infantry in your army, some 20-man unit. So for Dark Elves, I would say like a little unit of Witch Elves or Spearmen or something. For Wood Elves, a little unit of Eternal Guard. And just march them up and present a charge that looks so tempting to the other army. And think about when you're facing an army that's moving around you, zipping around all fast cav that you can't pin down.
You get
and
frustrated.
all of a sudden, there's this one unit of infantry in front of you.
You're like, I
presenting
can
themselves.
kill
You're
something,
like,
finally.
I can kill this unit. They're just there. And, you're going to sacrifice a relatively expensive unit, but by doing so, you can force an opposing...
That's a nasty mind game.
It's good, though. You can...
Sacrifice? Don't you mean flee?
Yeah, well, flee or whatever. Just do whatever
Yeah.
you need to force some flanks to be exposed.
Yeah, for sure.
And do that.
Yeah, try and pry them out of that castle.
Yeah.
There are other tactics you can use with magic and so forth to kind of help open that up, but
Vortex.
Yeah.
Right down the side of the castle.
absolutely, you position a wizard that can cast a vortex on one
Gross.
side, and watch them move out of the way real fast. So the downside of playing a fast cav army. Let's talk a little bit about that before everybody runs out and buys Wood Elves and Dark Elves.
What should we talk about? What's the good thing about? Have we already talked enough about the good thing about playing with them? I guess it's just the tactical challenge of managing such a fast. You're going to have incredibly technical movement phases, and I think that appeals to a lot of players in terms of you have to make yourself really sharp in terms of movement and thinking. It turns into a kind of chess game.
Yeah, you
where
have
you're
to think
thinking
quite far
really
ahead.
Far ahead.
Yep. The other upside is you have a lot of things to do, right? In the game, you're not just playing with 6 or 7 units tops. You've got a lot of you tend to have a lot of units. Each of them has its own threat range.
Right. You generally have a good shooting phase from whatever support shooting you're taking, those bolt throwers and
you're playing in every phase.
You're
of
playing
the game.
every phase of the game for sure, and doing pretty well in a lot of those phases.
Yeah. So the downside, the first downside is everything typically is low toughness and lightly armored.
Right.
So it dies pretty easily to anything.
Low model count.
And low model count.
Yeah.
So you got to spend a lot of attention ensuring you don't leave yourself open to being wiped out in that way. So that's definitely the hardest part about it. So you get punished really hard if you make mistakes.
Right.
I think the other downside is because you have to put so much thought into it, like a deployment phase in turn 1 of the game is going to be greater than half your playing time, usually. So if you're playing a 2.5 hour tournament game, you're going to expect an hour and 15 minutes before you're into turn 2. Because at least that's how it's been for me playing any kind of MSU. It tends to be, I have to think a lot about how I'm going to deploy things, because if I deploy wrong, I'm going to get punished a lot. So those are the two that jump out off the top of my head. Anything else you can think of?
Opponents wanting to punch you in the face for just running circles around them all game with your fast go. And it is, I don't know if it seems to be starting to be viewed as another kind of negative play style alongside just gun line and things like that. To have an army that is just entirely uncatchable. I personally don't think it's a negative play style because it requires a really high level of skill in the first place to actually pull it off.
Yep.
So it's a skillful way of playing. I can imagine to a relatively new player coming up against that in a tournament, it would just seem
Horrible.
kind of horrible and unfair.
Yeah, I could see that. I think the even against a new player, I mean, I'm by no means an expert, but even against a new player, making that one mistake and letting that charge come off that you shouldn't have, is going to potentially take out a third of your points in a single turn.
It is unforgiving.
It's very unforgiving, particularly with the Wood Elves, I think, because they're so lightly armored even compared to the Dark Elves. I think that's if you're playing up against that army, don't get frustrated. One of the tactics that your opponent is using is, it's the shell game, right? Moving everything around, and you got to pay attention.
Right.
I would say pick your targets and eliminate units.
Exactly. Pick units, do whatever you can to knock them out, and then your opponent's going to start sweating it just as much as you are, because it's a point. Remember, for them, it's hard to get points because they have to pull off these multi-charges.
Yeah, and always, I think one thing that always is going to help you is if you remember to make them take their March test. Because most of the time, those guys are on their own. They're out of their leadership bubble.
Mm-hmm.
Leadership 8, maybe 9, who knows.
They're going to fail it from time to time.
They're going to fail it.
And things like magic missiles that can force panic checks.
Yeah, and when they do fail it, that's usually when they get caught out.
Mm-hmm.
So they were counting on marching next turn or whatever, and if they fail that, then you might actually get your teeth into it. So just if you see that kind of army, make sure you call those march tests.
Turn something around and shoot them from a weird angle. It's going to make them flee in a direction they didn't even consider that unit's going to be in. It's going to screw with the whole plan,
Yep, absolutely. And typically these are units of 5 or 6,
Mm-hmm.
so you only need to pick off a couple of guys in it to make it take that panic test.
Yeah, and usually if they're 5 guys, you kill. If it's just one of them, they're below 25. They're not coming back. They're running off the board now.
So it's an unforgiving play style.
Yeah.
To me, I think actually playing against that sort of castle plus war machines is a very forgiving play style and is much more boring to play against because it's like, okay, well, you're sitting there playing by yourself,
right?
And I'm trying to move and interact.
Mm-hmm.
But then I'm obviously biased because I like that style. I like moving tons of stuff around on the board. I think for me, I would encourage everybody to if they haven't played a list like that, get a game in with it.
If you have an opponent
army,
who can even just proxy something as that or whatever,
play it yourself, play against it. It's a completely different game of Warhammer.
Yeah.
There's probably 5 or 6 archetypes of army, and this is one of them. And you should at least be ready to face it, even if you never want to play it yourself.
Yeah.
Oversized meatball.
Okay, so that wraps up our 8th episode. Wow, I'm pretty impressed that we've done 8. So
they didn't cancel us yet.
They'll never take us off the airwaves. So if you like our show, we would appreciate you leaving us a nice and shiny review on iTunes, because that helps other people find our show. Or if you hate our show, please email us and tell us what we should stop doing and what we should start doing. Chances are, if you've listened all the way through to this part, you don't hate it unless you're kind of one of those really bloody-minded people. But either way, thanks for listening.
In which case, ignore that last comment.
Yeah.
We don't want to hear from you anyways.
You can also find us on our forums at dimensionalcascade.com, and our blog is on there at /blog. And reach us on the Twitter at Cascade Podcast. I think that about wraps it up for us. We will see you again next time in a few weeks.
Yeah, we're all off to get our asses kicked by wood elves.